What is this motherfucking bullshit?
Warning, this podcast contains scenes of explicit nonsense and lore.
Previously on the Resident Evil podcast.
Outbreak.
Will you take the yellowish gold herb?
Pete, what's the thing that sounds like Peter Ustinov from RC? Is it called Ustinov? That thing that's like Nemesis.
I'll be honest, I'm not going to be showing my daughter Rachel Foley artwork.
I won't show a woman with her boobs hanging out, but I will show a grotesque bloated dead man. That's a great idea.
Resident Evil Podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 63 of the Resident Evil podcast. The Olympics, the Euro Championships, Wimbledon have all been cancelled, but we're still here, the sound of your summer. I'm Nick, better known as Neptune, but apparently also the Trouble Tuner. Let's see who's joining us today. He's known to spend his time in a cryostasis tube waiting to be advised to attack his boss. It stars TyranT.
Yo.
If you own more DVDs than this man, you've probably just purchased an old Blockbuster video shop. It's Rombie.
Hello.
It's true. Very true.
It's very true indeed.
To recreate that authentic mansion experience when he visits his basement, his prisoner trombone player is right on cue. It's George Trevor.
Good evening, hi.
And our special guest for this evening, she loves Resident Evil like Smaug loves the gold. It's the OracleDragon.
Hello, everyone.
Coming up on today's podcast, we'll be looking at all the latest Resident Evil news, both gaming and site, and so much has happened since our last podcast, which of course was Biohazard Stars 3. Check it out if you haven't done so already. Our main discussion today will be our analysis and review of the add-on 4V game Resident Evil Resistance, before ending with another edition of Neptune's Biohazard quiz. Let's start with the news. First bit of news, the August Resident Evil trailer didn't quite materialise. Despite the website telling us something would happen in August, this has been pushed back to Tokyo Game Show, which starts on September the 23rd. So this month, so not too far away. Put that date in your diary. So, yeah. I think anyone who's been following social media, who's on Discord communities, there's a lot of come on August, and it kind of kept ticking away, and there's a bit of pressure, I think, at the end to Capcom to release something, but it's a tad unfounded. I think.
Well, I just wanted to ask us, how much should we read into that delay? And when you just mentioned, how fair that was. So wasn't it Capcom themselves that made the announcement that there would be something in August? So the fact that there then wasn't, should we read too much into that?
It was on their website. So when the first trailer dropped for Resident Evil 8, they said at the end, more news coming August.
So surely they're organised enough, a video game company of that size would have known on that date what they had to announce and what they would be announcing and across what platforms and how they'd be doing it. So it just seems odd that that's them retract.
I guess for me, the only thing they should have done is at least told people it was delayed at the start of September to do it. I think that's really it. I don't think delays are an issue. I think most people are pretty will forgive people or the company pretty quickly for it. It's just perhaps you could have announced. I'm just waiting for that final trailer that just tells us everything anyway.
Well, that's standard, yeah. At least it's official.
Yeah, I think I just think you can't plan or schedule anything in the climate that we're in at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was about to say that as well. I think it's very difficult. They can do the best they can, and it'd be interesting again what they were going to show, because there has been some pictures, officially released pictures of some of the merchandise that was coming out at Tokyo Game Show. So there's like Resident Evil Village jackets and things like that, and T-shirts that you can purchase. So they're obviously planning something for TGS. I just wonder whether they thought, or perhaps what they were going to release wasn't quite ready or up to scratch. Because it does take a while to put these trailers together, because obviously they're created especially for that for an event of some sort, and it will take some time to build up tension and whatnot within a trailer setting. So perhaps they thought, you know what, let's save it for TGS, because I don't think they're on the list originally.
Well,
or was that
am I right
Gamescom?
to think that sort of particularly over the recent years, Capcom haven't had the biggest showing at either E3 or TGS. I'm trying to think the last time a major title, Resident Evil title, main title, was kind of showcased and dropped at TGS. Someone will probably say, RE2 last year or something, but they don't tend, do they, Capcom, over the last few years to have like the biggest presence at these big game shows?
Remind me, when did the final update for beginning hour launch? Was that at TGS?
Blimey. What, we're going back there, 2016 now? That's 40...
Yeah, that would be 2016, yeah.
God, blimey. Time flies, doesn't it? To keep that in mind, then going forward, we've got Tokyo Game Show coming up September 23rd. No, I don't think it's been specifically confirmed as to exactly when and what date it's happening, but just keep an eye out. Also, warning for people trying to avoid leaks. There's stuff going around again. No idea as to how accurate they are, but just try and keep it clear. Remember, our Discord is leak free, so if you want to join a community and be safe from leaks, then feel free.
I think the one thing, at least if you're using Twitter, without naming names, it's quite apparent who some of the kind of big personalities in the the leak fandom are. So I've managed, I don't know about you guys, sort of without being too careful, I've still managed to kind of avoid leaks because I kind of know which accounts to avoid.
I've had to mute, which is
Yes, we probably can guess who you've had to mute.
Resistance news seems odd because we're doing Resistance, but since the last podcast, a new paid DLC has been released where survivors can now wear Leon and Claire outfits. There's actually, I think, been a couple of patches recently, so we can briefly just. Won't talk too long because we're going to be talking about the main game, but if you really want to dress up as Leon and Claire without being able to play as Leon and Claire, now you can. I'm guessing that's just been added to the skins options.
It is the first paid DLC, whereas the content is usually has been free up until now.
Yes. There's been a few patches as well, a couple of new storyline lore implication patches, which has kind of got the community wagging their dog tails, so to speak. We'll get onto that a bit later on. But it's good to see that Resistance continues to get that support on a very regular basis at the moment, although, as we will probably allude to, still some issues about the overall remit of the game and how these patches should be implemented, but still lots coming, so I'm sure I'll be saying Resistance news quite frequently over the next couple of years or so. We'll see how it goes. Remake 3 news. Oh yes, for people like me that can't complete the games in a timely fashion, the Unlock Everything DLC is now available. They did something similar with Resident Evil 2 Remake, where you can purchase basically a key, an in-game key, and you can unlock all the weapons and all the downloadable content. Well, not downloadable content, but the rewards, if you like, for getting all the points in the game, and that's an option available for people that don't necessarily have the time to go through it all, especially some of the later difficulties. Inferno mode is known to be pretty difficult, especially the end Nemesis boss.
No, just as you mentioned Remake, I was just thinking to myself, when was the last time I played that?
Sales figures news. Oh yes, we do like to bring everyone up to date with sales figures, and this actually leads on quite nicely to what I just said. So Remake 3 sold 2.7 million copies in its first 3 months, but compare that to Remakes 2, where they sold 4.2 million copies in 2 months, 1 week. So that's quite a significant difference, I would suggest. Yeah, over what? Nearly over million and a half difference in a longer period of time as well. So the uptake for Remake 3 hasn't been quite as good as it was for Remake 2. Anyone want to comment as to why you think that's happened?
I think there are definitely two major factors. I think we've talked about this about 7 sales, which is one, that it's been quite heavily promoted and discounted frequently, which is good. Like, that's not a bad thing. That's things that you should be doing with the game over time. But the VR thing is clearly what will help, because not only is it like a poster child for VR on PlayStation, but it also gets bundled in the current VR, one of the VR packs as well, which obviously every one of those it sells a unit. When you look at all the other ones that have sold high numbers, they've all been the really action-y based titles. 5 and 6 have both topped around 10 million. So for that alone to get as high as it is by itself just shows you how much people have latched onto it. I guess the other thing I did want to touch on in regards to the sales, I guess, is the Remake 2 and Remake 3 sales. Because Remake 2 sold really well. It's actually, like, on a scale of how fast it sold really well. But 3, the expectations for 3 was going to sell as well, if not better, because of all the hype around 2. And clearly that just hasn't been the case. It has not sold as well in its first quarter as 2 did. I mean, it's still early days. Things could change. But I think the style of the game and the way it reviewed and just the length and all that kind of put people off paying full price. But that may mean it's just got longer sales to be later when it's a cheaper title. People go, I was meaning to pick that up. I really did like Remake 2. So, I mean, interesting to see where it goes.
I mean, I don't know. I think sort of with 2, it kind of hit like a pinnacle in terms of exciting the sort of the old school fans and sort of newer people, and many kind of like general streamers that don't necessarily focus just on Resident Evil were playing the game, and there was a good buzz about it. And that's why I believe Capcom kind of rushed and wanted to get 3 out, to kind of hit that crest of a wave, of the that they got with RE2, which is why I just always feel that RE3 just feels rushed. There's some fantastic highs, particularly at the beginning of the game, and then sort of sections that aren't quite thought through, and you wonder how much playtesting was put into that. Yeah, obviously the point that it's just not as good as a game. It just doesn't have as much universal appeal,
which is a shame, because I would think that, like, looking at the OGs, the OG Resident Evil 3 is just as loved in the RE community, but perhaps not in the wider community, gaming community.
I don't think it had that popularity among sort of more casual PlayStation owners as 2 did.
Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing here.
The reason that they didn't do well in sales is because they rushed the game, because right after the accidental release of those images, Capcom thought, oh no, we better release it as soon as possible, considering everybody was demanding and hounding, release it. So instead of taking their time like they were supposed to do, they rushed it out. That's why if you look at some of the in-game files and camera hack, you'll find that there's locations where we're supposed to go to or encounters that never happened because they cut it out. Someone actually found an unused Nemesis encounter at the RPD. And then there was a second orphanage that was behind the orphanage in the game that was laid out differently. So apparently something was going to happen in that section, but it was scrapped.
Oh,
so
wow.
Who knows what they were going to do, because there was so much they were planning, but apparently they had to rush it because everybody was demanding it. That's why it's like a speedrunner's delight. And they scrapped Nemesis pursuing you because people complained about Mr. X being too difficult to get around.
Wow.
Which I find is stupid, because Mr. Nemesis. Nemesis was supposed to follow you. That's how he was in the original, but we don't like it when Mr. X keeps following us around. He's just too difficult to get around. You have multiple rooms, multiple corridors. You can get around him pretty easily.
This is really interesting. So I didn't know about this. So I take the point about Mr. X and Nemesis is spot on. I think one of our criticisms was that Nemesis is more Nemesis with Mr. X, or the Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 is more like Nemesis, and the Nemesis in Resident Evil 3 is more like Mr. X. I did think that, because I remember when we played the demo of Resident Evil 3, we went into one of the shops, I can't remember which one, where there looks to be a downstairs part to it. And I remember everyone going, "Oh, yeah, definitely be able to explore that." They've just blocked it off for the demo, but that never materialised as well. So I do wonder if there was going to be a greater sense of exploration in that part of the kind of uptown area as well.
I'm trying to remember if someone did a camera hack or something.
Right.
They found out some information through data mining that we were going to have expanded areas to explore, but they decided not to do it.
I do
I'm
wonder.
going to have to relook that up.
Yeah, I do wonder how much was it, because I mean, a lot of the game was leaked by March, February time. You know, we knew, sadly, it was going around that, you know, the game started in Jill's apartment. It started off. I think we knew it started off in first person. So I do wonder if you're right there, Oracle, whether there was a bit of a push to get it out.
Oh, I remember at that gas station that we encountered in the game, where Carlos has to shoot the gas tanker to stop Nemesis. If I remember correctly, somebody actually camera hacked into that area, and it's fully detailed and stuff. Like, you were able to explore it, but they only use it for a cutscene.
Oh, what, the whole cool part outside Jill's apartment that you just kind of casually walk through?
I think after you leave the subway, there's like a pathway that leads to a gas station, but it's blocked off and you can only see it in the distance. And then when you come back and you are fleeing from Nemesis, Carlos manages to save you. This is when he has the rocket launcher, I think, or the flamethrower. He shoots the tanker that's full of gas, and he rolls in dramatically as they close the doors. That area was supposedly fully detailed, and you can actually explore it if you camera hacked.
Yeah, you can actually go into the gas station shop, and it's all detailed with shelves and everything like that.
Well,
this is probably why a lot of people didn't like the game, is because they rushed it. It's a speedrunner's delight, and you can't explore, and there's no decision making.
Wow! There we go, ladies and gentlemen. It's upsetting as well, because, you know, if you wanted to appeal to the speedrunners, that's fine. But Resident Evil 2 is a good speedrunner's game, but at the same time, it still allowed you to do a lot of the exploration. It kind of ticked both boxes.
Yeah, because if you look at the time differences between playing Remake 2 and Remake 3, you can see that Remake 3 is very, very, very quick, because it's a linear path. You just go this way, keep going. Yeah, you beat the game.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Aaron. That was fascinating. But let's have a look. Capcom updated all their sales figures as well. So
this is a good one, guys. Get ready for this.
I think what's coming.
So, but also going back to the period, so Resident Evil 7 sold 3.5 million copies in 2 months, 1 week. So, again, less than Resident Evil 2, but more so than Resident Evil 3. But Resident Evil 6 sold 4.5 million, and Resident Evil 5 sold 4.4 million in its first 3 months.
But what does this make Resident Evil 7 now, Nick?
Yes, why you seem always reluctant to say it?
Well, I'm glad you asked, gentlemen. So the overall figures have been released by Capcom, and it's good news for Resident Evil 7. Now the series' biggest selling single generation game at a whopping 7.9 million units, overtaking some games set in Africa with Chris and Sheva, Resident Evil 5, which is 7.7 million.
I honestly think this is one of the best success stories in the series could have, to be honest, because what a way to send such a positive message to Capcom. I know 7 has its critics and it doesn't work for everybody, but it was, in so many ways a return to form after 6, and it reminds me of the success that the Remake HD remaster got when it became like the best-selling PSN title of all time when it was released or something. Yeah. And I just, these are really positive messages to send to Capcom that, this is the direction that people really do want, as opposed to, Umbrella Corps.
And I was actually thinking about this the other day in terms of, I hope Capcom just take this on board. It's already too late now if they haven't taken this on board when they were developing and doing the design for Resident Evil 8 for Village. Because just like Sean, I just think it's so fantastic. And not I'm not like sort of lording it over Resident Evil 5 and putting it down. 5, the story that it gives, the narrative to the series is fantastic. Yeah, it's just brilliant. Because I think we were all quite concerned what the universal appeal would be to the HD remasters or Remake. And I can remember when we found out that the online sales were so high. That was fantastic. And it just feels wonderful, doesn't it? That the ingredients that drew us to this series in the first place are now the same ingredients. And I'm like people like me and Sean that are such fans of Resident Evil 7, we don't think that it's flawless. There are a lot of problems with Resident Evil 7, but like many have said, Sean mentioned just now, it was a return back to those ingredients, and I think it's just fantastic.
Just to balance it out a bit, though, for people that don't necessarily like that. So, as I said, Resident Evil 5 sold 7.7 million copies, and Resident Evil 6 7.6 million copies. Resident Evil 5 is still cumulatively the biggest selling game, with total sales of over 11 million. But then that's been over a few consoles and 2 generations, of course. Remake 2 is already at 7.2 million. And is likely to become number 1 at some point. Which again is great, because regardless of perhaps the Cliff Notes version of Resident Evil 2, it's still a wonderful Resident Evil / survival horror experience. So I'm pleased for that as well. So Remake 2 doing very well, Resident Evil 7 doing very well.
I think the point, Nick, the point with 7 isn't that it's top and that we all want it to be top. And yeah, you're right. Resident Evil 2 will come to overtake it. It's just the fact that it wasn't a flop, frankly. Just the fact that it was a success is really, really important and significant for the direction of this series going forward.
Next bit of news, Resident Evil is getting a mobile phone crossover. Oh, yes. But sadly, not quite a new mobile phone, but it's a crossover with the game Life After. This was released not too long ago, actually, on the 27th of August, available on the App Store and Google Play. We got a brand new trailer, which showed Jill being more unlike Alice from the films, but there we go, and a certain Albert Wesker overseeing things, standing up high.
Yeah, there's a bit of a continuity error there in that freaking trailer. RE4 Leon and an RE5 Wesker in Raccoon City.
And you just know someone out there is deliciously rubbing their hands thinking, how can I justify this in the canon?
It goes in the same timeline as when Mr. X turned up in Monster Hunter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
there's another crossover event, but I don't know a lot about Life After. I in fact never heard of it until this came out. So yeah, I haven't heard any bad things, but on the flip side, I haven't heard any good things about the crossover. It's been quite silent. It's been out for about a week now, so silence is not great, I suppose. As they say, Mark.
I've seen people already complain as to why it's Leon and Ada and not Claire.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because they keep milking Leon. What I'm seeing in the trailer, it looks like you might form a team and explore, or you play with other players, and you basically go to areas, shoot zombies, go to another area, fight a boss, look for supplies, and stuff like that. There's the Executioner, Mr. X, and Nemesis in this game.
Oh.
Plus, for some reason, the Cerberuses look more alive than dead. Yeah, because when they first revealed that trailer, it's like, why do they look alive? They're just like, rawr, rawr, rawr. Where's the blood? Where's the gore? Where's the bones? Nope, they look like normal dogs wagging their tails.
So they look like the dogs from the live action films, just with a
pretty much,
just with a bit of leather or whatnot strapped over their backs. Talking of Alice, oh yes, the 4K ultra high definition collection for the Anderson movies is coming. Oh yes, on the 3rd of November. Now the question that you're obviously asking yourselves at home: why should I be interested? Well, the answer is you probably shouldn't. But if you are a big fan of the films, and why not? Why not? The version of Apocalypse is an extended edition, which, as far as I know, has never been never been released before.
It's been available in Germany before.
In Germany, I was about to say. I think I've heard it was on Germany. I wasn't sure if it actually got a physical release.
It has. That has been confirmed, and it's basically just an insert of some of the deleted scenes into the movie.
Oh, is it? Okay, so okay, you can't get that excited then. If you were remotely getting excited, but they're going to be released as a 4K UHD collection. They're already available in 4K. At least some of them are. Yeah, so now it's coming in a rather nice looking kind of box collection, just to round that out. So
the only question is as a result of this is how much did it cost to put your pre-order down, Nick?
I have not pre-ordered. I've got final chapter on UHD. But that was purely in preparation for our audio commentary whenever we do that.
Honestly, on a 4K basis, I don't know about the first movie, but I'd say the majority of them are going to hold up on a visual level pretty well. The fact that the middle ones were shot on, the Pace camera in 3D, pretty high definition, a couple of phantoms rigged together, I think. Probably a nice set, but, it doesn't change the quality of the films. So, for someone who hasn't ever watched them, if it's a good price for 6 films, all power to them, but I don't see it joining my collection.
More live-action Resident Evil news, and you'd have to be living under a rock to have not noticed this bit of news. The Resident Evil Netflix TV series is coming soon. Oh yes, announced recently, the limited series takes on Resident Evil in 8 by 1 hour episodes. The showrunner is Andrew Dabb, who previously has worked with on Supernatural. Browan Hughes worked on Walking Dead, and Bronwyn will direct the first 2 episodes. So what is this going to be about? Well, is this going to be a really cleverly written, intricate storyline, perhaps detailing the early involvement of the Raccoon Police Department in an eerie, atmospheric, creepy environment? Are we going to see murder-type investigations, perhaps hints of zombies and Cerberus in the forest? No.
The Stars TV show that we've all wanted.
Yeah, is it going to be that? No, it's not. We're going to be talking about Billy and Jade Wesker. Who are they? Oh, yes. Yeah, the 14-year-old kids of Albert Wesker. Brace yourself. So this got announced on Twitter and all things, and if I was to say it hasn't gone down particularly well, would that be a fair assessment?
I think it's been widely despised, Nick, to be honest. Resident Evil fans are stubborn and oft difficult to please, but I think everyone's been unified in just bewilderment, really, more than anything. It's not necessarily even like an anger. It's just more a kind of, how did a concept like this get greenlit? Of all the world and all the lore and all the interesting stories in the characters you could potentially tell within this universe and keep it well within canon as well. Like, this is what not only someone came up with, but also has been greenlit and funded. I think that's been the real shocker.
The weird thing to me is that the juxtaposition is that I read it and it feels like it's definitely trying to market this more at a teen level, right? You've got a teenage group and an adult group. Some of them are trying to have their cake and eat it too. Because the thing is that's been doing really well on Netflix lately is obviously these like really high profile action movies. A lot of these have got big stars and they've got big budgets and stuff, but they're doing really well. They're all in their like top 10 most watched objects. So you'd probably go, hey, if we're going to make a series that's based on a video game and it's quite actiony and the movies are actiony, like, I would have understood more if it was more in key with the movies, because you would at least go, oh, Netflix is just cashing in on the fact that action content. I think I could say a million things about the plot. I joked about on the Resident Evil fan Twitter about this because I woke up and I sat down to read what was going on and I saw all this reaction going, oh my god, rescue kids. What's going on with this? And I was like, oh, what's this? And they read through the comments. I was like, wow, this is like back in 2001 when there was the reveal of like what was happening with the Resident Evil movie. All of a sudden it had like a homicidal computer in it. And everyone was like, a homicidal computer? That's not Resident Evil. Yeah, and so I had a field day as far as I was concerned. I was just highly entertained by it all.
It's a bit of deja vu from 2000.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to be too quick to condemn it. We'll have to wait and see. But I think I just heard what you were just saying. The shock that it's got to this stage where, like you say, it's been greenlit, it's all official, it's been confirmed. It does really irk that you hear the term Wesker children and you think of that fantastic file from Lost in Nightmares, and that's a great narrative piece to the series with Alex Wesker, and you think maybe they're using that to kind of have a connection with Wesker, but at the same time a different take. So maybe they're using one of the Wesker kids, but from what we've heard, I made a joke about the Brady Bunch online, but I am a little bit worried. It does, yeah.
It's set in New Raccoon City, isn't it? New Raccoon City. I mean, this is something what Doctor Who does in New York, which they called it.
What does that even mean, New Raccoon City?
It means about the same thing as Neo Umbrella. It's being so frightened of actually going in new directions and things like that you have to sort of pander to nostalgia by bringing back the Wesker name and Raccoon City. This is why I love Resident Evil 7, everybody.
Is it literally like a parallel universe? Is this kind of is it like a reimagining? Is that what it is?
Well, no one knows really. I mean, the thing is, episode 1 did leak about 6 months ago and was distributed amongst the fandom. If you knew the places to look and whatnot, it's not good, in all honesty. But I won't say anything about it because obviously it'll be classed as spoilers and things like that. There's 2 timelines it's set in, and one is, I think it's 2022, and the other timeline is 15 years later. And Raccoon 2 is very much a thing, yeah, or the new Raccoon. I think it was Raccoon 2 in the original, in the leaked script, and it's now been changed to New Raccoon. But Wesker having 2 daughters is very much within part of the story, yes.
Billy and Jade Wesker.
Jade and Billy.
Yeah. We could have had something.
Which I find is weird because there's 2 characters in that script that are 2 characters from my story.
Really?
Someone's been stealing your
from 8
fanfic.
years ago, and they're like, "Hey, we're going to take these characters and we're going to put it in our script." It's strange that they're very similar to that fan fiction character.
You didn't submit your story to Capcom. Did you?
I wish, because I would like to see it actually publicized or something and be like, "Oh, cool. Yeah, that's fine."
you know how much we're all like anti-leak and anti-spoiler within the Discord and the podcast and everything, but I'm going to give you this juicy tidbit from the leaked script. Okay, you ready? It might not make it to the final episode, of course, but in the leaked script, there is a dog called Pablo. There you go.
Hey, Pablo.
Pablo, what a name, eh?
It's George, exactly what you said. I mean, in theory, they could. It's so easy, this world, to make something unique. They could have used the Wesker children. We could have seen finally Derek Wesker in all his glory, couldn't they? And
Derek Wesker,
or even the Trevor.
Yeah, any of it. It could have just gone off on their own little tangent. And you know what? If you wanted to include it, why not? But I don't know. I just don't see why it's that difficult to make a Resident Evil TV show.
No, I mean I can remember when we discussed. Do you remember when that art clay concept kind of dropped that then later became Dave? And I can remember Batman on our podcast sort of talking about how a narrative could work. Talked about like a TV drama, I think, set sort of in around Raccoon City, and I think we mentioned Stoneville, and then I'm sure Batman mentioned something about, we could have like Wesker could make a cameo, or Brian Irons, you could see some of the way that Wesker say suppressing evidence in an investigation, and these characters could come in and make little cameos. So it can be done.
The other part of it that we've got to touch on is really not, someone comes up with an idea that they agree with, or that, someone pitched an idea that was just different for the sake of being different, and they went with it because they went, it's not that the films weren't profitable, but more that, this is an opportunity on a different platform. The thing about Netflix is that, as far as I'm aware, the studio makes an agreement, because obviously it's really hard to say. It's not like you're going into the movie theater and paying £5 or whatever to watch of something. You have to split the number of views over and pay a percentage based off the subscribers' fee. I think there's a Netflix film coming up recently which has got like a $200 million budget. It's like one of the highest budgets they've spent on. Equivalently, they've got about 200 million subscribers. So essentially, it would be like taking $1 from every single subscriber they've currently ever got and putting that into a film. So it shows you. But when someone watches part or a whole of a film or a TV show on Netflix, the production company that owns that, if it isn't Netflix, takes its cents. Like it's per view, so many cents. So you might get 8 cents because I watched an episode of this, or 5 cents because I watched this movie. So you've got to think that a lot of these have to add up over the cost of thousands and thousands. So it's an interesting way of doing it. So it's definitely got some risk in the design. So the way they've got to make it appeal to the Netflix demographic. And there's probably all sorts of stuff that Netflix can tell you as a production company. If you're going to make something on their platform and it's got a certain genre to it, you want to make it appealing to a certain group. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this whole idea about having 2 timelines is to try and appeal to a wider, to have like a young group to appeal for like teenagers and maybe 20-year-olds, and then like an adult group that will appeal with any kind of post-apocalyptic kind of thing that's going to appeal to like an older audience, or people perhaps more likely to bigger franchise. But I mean, this is hypothesis. Could be completely off base. I won't know until what the end result is, I guess.
Interesting though. especially about the net. I didn't know that's how actually Netflix operated.
I don't want to trash it and to try and like not to be negative, even though it's very difficult. But like, if anyone saw the interview with Andrew Dabb, it reeks of the same interview that Paul Anderson gave in the promo to the original Resident Evil movie. So he's basically bludgeoning us in this interview that he's the biggest fan of Resident Evil in the world. You'll struggle to find a bigger fan than I am of the series. I just honestly say, if you really truly are, this is what you came up with. Honestly.
That concludes our gaming news. We now move over to our site news. And first up, we'd like to thank our new patrons who have joined us since the last podcast. So a big shout out and thank you to the following: RPGs and Death Metal, thank you very much. Did I Ask for Fries? Thank you. Luke Marriott, Benny and the Jets, Colin Colhoven, aka Fladcap, Silek and Charlie Soundhouse. Thank you so much for your contributions and your support. If you're interested in becoming a patron, then head over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/The Resident Evil Podcast, and you can find out all about our benefits. And actually, it's worked out quite nicely because you may have noticed, but thanks to our supporters, we've been able to upgrade our website. So we've now moved over to a new server, so things should run a little bit quicker than it did before. If you are browsing the timeline, which is obviously still the main focal point, then just as a little tidbit, download it. It should open up in a PDF, and you should be able to just do a kind of file save as and download it to your computer or phone or whatnot, and then that's a bit better than kind of running it off the PDF off the website. So that's my little tip. This upgrade came at exactly the right time because site news, you may have seen that podcast staff member Batman, who's taken a little break for the time being, he had an interview with Eurogamer website. Well worth checking out and reading all about Batman's experiences in bringing the timeline into fruition. You can find that on the Eurogamer website. Slightly older news now, but if you go onto our website and look on the news, it should be there. You may have to click on the older news entries, but you'll find a link to that interview with Batman that was done. So a big thanks to Eurogamer for contacting Batman about it, and we were more than happy to oblige. So well worth checking that out as well.
I just want to say, as someone who's as part of my Resident Evil history within this community, written a timeline of sorts many years ago, what John's accomplished here is far beyond anything I would have ever had the time or effort to be able to do. It truly is an astonishing piece of work, and I know that I know there's people out there who disagree with certain theories of his and whatnot, but that shouldn't get in the way of the fact that this has been a labour of love. And even if you just have a passive interest or a hardcore interest in this series, just please appreciate the effort that this guy's given 10 years of his life to do this. And obviously he's not here to be able to sort of speak about it now. So I'm kind of speaking on his behalf in a sense, but, I know he's proud of it. We're all, just proud to be affiliated in some distant way with it. It's a great piece of work. Thanks to Eurogamer for obviously doing it, because it's just so nice to see success stories within this community. Don't happen often, and it's genuinely nice to be so close to one happening, and being affiliated with Batman is a genuine honor. So thanks to everybody who's read, supported, tweeted, everything like that. So it's been brilliant.
And then the recognition that he's getting, because, as we know, being close to him over the years, he's not one of these people to kind of seek out that recognition or to do this timeline, to sort of get plaudits or anything. He goes about his business, sort of his passion, very quietly. And we know, there's so many people in the community have benefited of, even very recently, since it's had this, since it's been out in the news, have used Batman's timeline for their own work and their own things. So, I just thanks for people appreciating it, but I hope in the future, if anyone does find it useful, that always give a little credit and a little shout, because it's great recognition. It's been a labour of love for many years.
So our Resident Evil Extinction audio commentary is now available on Podbean and YouTube. So we have had quite a lot of Paul Anderson related media, this podcast, but never mind. So, Sean, this was your first watch of Resident Evil Extinction.
It was indeed.
And how did you enjoy it, sir?
It does benefit from actually being made by a filmmaker. This one, you know, this is Russell Mulcahy, I think is how you pronounce his name, who is obviously famous for Highlander, and it's very cinematically shot. But you know, yikes, is it like it's all over the place pace wise. It's really misguided, the narrative, and the fact that it doesn't necessarily it sort of exists. Because I've seen most of Afterlife, so I know where it goes after it, and it feels very out of place within its own continuity. Ian Glenn is kind of great, but he's not given enough to do, and then he just becomes a weird, like almost dead aim homage tyrant at the end. But like the telegraphing and everything of most of the movie is clear as day. Oh, look, they're in the laser hallway for the tyrant fight. I wonder how Ian Glenn's going to die here. You know, it's just that kind of thing. It's all a bit predictable. It's still a mess, and the best bits still, you know. And I don't mean to hate on it too much, but it's like the best bits are when Alice isn't on screen.
That's
but it's true.
It's true. You're right. That's a good point, actually.
Other site news, Resident Evil podcast supporter and long-term friend of the show, The Selfish Gene, has produced a rather handy video detailing the differences of Resident Evil 2's original Nightmare mode. Oh, yes. Although Nightmare mode is now becoming quite a kind of staple of some modes, it was actually done way back in Resident Evil 2, exclusively on the Dreamcast and the PC version. And there are lots of subtle differences between those versions and the normal kind of hard mode, as you would have inferred, Nightmare being particularly difficult. And Selfish Gene has produced a video for us, which you can see on our YouTube channel, and again we've linked it on our website as well. But I thought that was a fascinating video because a lot of the information that he showed that I never knew about. So I think he gives an example right at the end. One zombie taking 32 bullets to kill.
Yeah.
I knew about Nightmare mode and I knew it was difficult. But basically, now I think you've got your inspiration for the Remake 2 zombies being so robust. Because, like, Gene basically describes as, like, you know, the rest of the enemies in the game haven't had much in the way changed, but it's mainly, like, a reduced ammo count and very, very hard to kill zombies. And that's, in a sense, Remake 2 in a nutshell, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, Remake 2 was more about disabling the zombies as opposed to actually destroying them.
So check out that video from Gene. It's also quite amusing because you can see how many ammunition it takes to knock down Brad, who is now literally a monster in this game. Final bit of site news, talk about me, which I don't like to do too much, but I have been on the streams again, so brace yourself, ladies and gentlemen. But the final two parts of Resident Evil 0 have been completed. That went quite well, and that was me showcasing, well, obviously one of the most controversial titles in the series, I would suggest. And we're also back in the Resident Evil 7 series as well. Oh yes, so the latest is up. Plenty of jump scares. We are experiencing the Lucas booby traps and an extremely tense Jack battle as well in the boathouse. All available on our YouTube page, which was originally done on Twitch, so feel free to check that out. That does conclude all our news. Bit of a monster news session this time, but with that being said, we'll now turn our attention to the main discussion of this podcast. It's Resident Evil Resistance.
That did not turn out as I expected.
Resident Evil Resistance, the add-on to Resident Evil 3, a free download to play when you install the game. It's a separate download, of course, on off your Resident Evil 3 disc. This was very much the replacement for Operation Mad Jackal, which to most people is one of the best mini games that's ever been released by Capcom as part of an add-on. So it had quite large shoes to fill, should we say. But this game is significantly larger than Operation Mad Jackal. It's very much its own thing, and for all intents and purposes, it's its own separate game, which is why we've basically commissioned its own entire podcast to it. Lots of trepidation with this. Again, it's Capcom testing the waters, should we say, with a different style of play and using the Resident Evil franchise to see how it works within that genre. So the question we'll be asking ourselves today is, did it work, and what are our overall views on it? So we'll start with some preliminary thoughts, and I want to get the initial thoughts of our special guest, which is TheOracleDragon. So Aaron, what's your kind of like a couple of sentences, couple of paragraphs, if you like, about Resistance and what you thought overall of it?
What I thought about it. Let's see. Resistance is pretty fun as long as you are paced properly instead of rushing through it. Nice environments, interesting creatures and stuff they added into it. Good weapon choices. Pace of the game. And sometimes you can find hidden Easter eggs if you look carefully. So yeah.
Bonjour, mon ami.
Lovely. Well, that's wonderful. We're lovely and positive. Let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum. Starred. I'm joking.
I don't ill will toward this game. I think.
No, you don't.
You know, as we'll get into great detail, it's founded on a solid idea. It's the closest you're going to have to a spiritual successor to Outbreak, but at the same time, it falls far short of like what Outbreak was able to achieve nearly 17, 18 years ago. There's big questions that I've got to ask, which we will do over the course of the discussion, but it basically boils down to let's give this discussion a heading, which is what is Resistance's problem? Is it a lack of ambition or a lack of budget? That's where I'll sort of leave my initial findings.
We will see who is better with the devices. You know this game, do you not?
George Trevor.
Sorry, I must apologise in advance because my experience with this game is limited. I played the beta version very early on, like the demo when it came out with TheOracleDragon. We had a quick game, didn't we? And I definitely like the concept. I like the idea. I often think that Operation Raccoon City gets a hard time when you think about kind of the ability for us to play online sort of characters within the Resident Evil universe online, each with different characteristics, specific like special abilities, and how that can work together. So I think it was quite ambitious, and I like the idea. And I always thought in the beginning, was it kind of to test the waters for an eventual Outbreak 3? So while the general style I'm not a fan of, I've always been happy to have these extra bonus games, like we had Mercenaries and Mad Jackal and these things at the end of original RE2 and RE3. It's always been important to me, the story, the narrative of those games, how they can influence the canon, and that's been a big concern of mine. Is how hearing that Alex Wesker is going to return, and I'd rather see these characters return in proper mainline titles than these kind of bonus mini games. And how many more characters as well? I found it very difficult to sort of engage with the another new set of kind of teenage characters.
I like your spirit, but you are lacking the strategy.
Well, we'll come to that. That's going to be our first kind of main point. But Rombie, what's your initial thoughts on Resistance?
I think going back to what we were talking about just before about the sales thing, obviously that has a certain dent in the expectations of a free mode attached to a main game that is selling as perhaps could have to the overall, and then you add the element of the fact there's a lot of people on there who just looked at it or popped it on and installed it once and then went, ugh, this isn't me. This isn't what I was expecting. That kind of, I think that's a mistake. I think not in the sense that they shouldn't, try it. They may not like it, but I think two things: having it as a separate installer was a really bad idea. I think it should have been something that you put access through the menu of 3, and I think there should have been tie-over elements for 3. Like you obviously go through and get points for unlocking things in 3. There should have been bonuses that you unlocked in Resistance, even if they were cosmetic ones, just for finishing or content in 3, which would have given people more incentive to jump between that game. Beside from that, I feel pretty conflicted about it. I think I agree in some ways. There's a lot of good ideas going on, but hampered by a lot of shortcomings and not some thought in certain areas and not in others. And especially, and I'm sure we'll get to it, just the imbalance that Capcom seems to be constantly.
I control everything here.
So a bit like George, it's not really my type of game, and in many ways it goes completely against the grain as what I like to do in Resident Evil. People who've ever watched my streams will know I'm probably a bit methodical when I play Resident Evil. I know how I play my games. I'll go into a room, I'll examine the room, I'll explore every inch of said room to get my surroundings, and then move on to the first door that I can and go into that room and do exactly the same thing, come back out and then go and so forth. When I played the game, that's what I was instinctively wanting to do. It's got in the RE engine. It looks like Remake 2, but you don't get that opportunity to have an explore because you've got a whacking great countdown timer coming down. So
online games don't have Nick mode.
They do not have Nick. No, they do not. So I was up against it. So that's where I'm coming from. But for people who haven't played the game, it's a 4v1, i.e. you have 5 players in it. 4 players will be chosen as the survivors, and you can choose which character, and then the other person plays as a mastermind, whereby they choose another character to then try and kill the other 4 in an asymmetrical battle royale simulation type mode. Quite a popular mode, I'm told. in online games, and I think there's a Silent Hill one coming out, isn't there? With
Dead by Daylight.
Dead by Daylight.
Yeah, so it's clearly got some legs online. So a lot of this will be pairing it to how other games, and I think Friday the 13th is also another.
Yeah, and the Predator one as well.
And the so yeah, a bit like when we reviewed Operation Raccoon City, which you can check out on our Podbean pages. It's by how does this game not only compare to how Resident Evil fans like it, but it's also how it compares to source material. If that you're basing it upon. So Slant 6 should have done a good job because they had a lot of expertise with that type of squad-based game. So this is what we're going to be looking at. Is this a good 4v1 game? Primarily, is it a good Resident Evil game? So that's looking at it. So the first area I think we should focus on are the characters, because inevitably that is where people get to choose who they want to be, and you have a selection, an assortment of brand new characters that George alluded to. Again, kind of like you describe them all as teenagers. They're not all teenagers, I don't think. So there are, I think, 6 survivors that you can choose, 7 if you include Jill. So each of them has their own special powers whereby they can do different things, and they all fulfill a different role within your team. So if we start with the first one, a lovely lady called January Van Sant. She is a computer hacker and works at News Comet. Lore fans of the series will know that that's already part of the existing canon, which is quite a nice little teaser / Easter egg.
I love also how the hacking person works for a newspaper, implicating the idea that newspaper people hack into everything these days.
They do, well, that's absolutely.
And yes, Lore fans, Alyssa is indirectly referenced in her bio. So
she is, yes. There we go. So another little link to Outbreak. Now she has the ability to use EMP, doesn't she, to be able to take out some of the cameras. So Masterminds use the cameras to be able to look around the playing area, the environments, and she can take them out.
Anyone who's played Remake 2 as Ada, it's basically that same concept. You target a camera, you hit your button, and it fills a time bar up, and then when the time bar's completed, the camera's disabled.
Yes, that's right, and then that helps the other team members. Is she a good character to play as?
January is you could argue is one of the most essential ones, because she basically works to slow down the mastermind, and the slower the mastermind's able to work, and she gets like other abilities later, which makes like the mastermind unable to move cameras for 15 seconds. That can be like a variation of a fever skill, which is the skill that builds over time, and then you can use it in a limited capacity. I would say most good teams will have a January, in all honesty.
So January's got this ability. What's she like in terms of ability to not get eaten.
Well, she gets a starting pistol, and one of her latest skill unlocks is actually really fun because it gives her a random chance to get a special weapon out of the item box that you get at the start of each round. So, for example, I think you were there, Nick, when we did our learning stream, or was it the other night with you, GT? The first item box of a session had the rocket launcher in it straight away, and then in the second round, the minigun was there. So by round 2, as January, I had one pistol and a rocket launcher and a minigun.
Lovely.
So that's just one of her skill sets enables that as a potential. She's very handy to have on the team. She is, because what I would say is, working within a cohesive unit, if like a January in your team has that, you would obviously buy the minigun and then drop it off to like a damage dealing character and things like that. It's all about working as a unit and in perfect harmony. A January wouldn't hoard all the weapons herself because there's not as much benefit to do that.
The little cogs of your mind are spinning, but they do not connect, oui?
So then we've got Valerie Harmon. Now, she is a student. Now, what's quite nice here, George, you would have noted that she is friends with Yoko from Resident Evil Outbreak. Now, she acts as... you did notice this, George. You did. Now, Yoko is the kind of healer of the team, and she's able to use lots of first aid sprays and can also help. The term is kind of like point in the direction of other items for other players, so she can go into rooms, kind of scout it out, and that's who I tended to play as, but mainly out of fear, I think, more than anything else, because I think if she's got the herbs, then I'll be safer. But that's, you can kind of tell other people where the items are.
Yeah.
And also, apparently, enemies can drop more explosive items. One of the skills that also is impacted there. I didn't know that one, but there we go.
No, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think because the enemies can drop ammo, can't they, in this?
Mm.
And apparently...
I only thought maybe it's the supply zombie.
Yeah, I think... perhaps, yeah. I think she's more likely to drop... if you're doing it, then they're more likely to drop.
Yeah, one of her various skill variants is Surplus. Causes a killed creature to possibly drop grenades or flash grenades.
Yeah, that's great.
So I liked Valerie. I thought she was a cool character.
She also shares the Yoko trait in that she has a backpack, which gives her, I think, Aaron, you'll have to probably correct me, is it 2 extra item slots? She's the only one that has extra.
That would almost certainly have been a plus point for me playing.
She does. I like Valerie the best.
She's cool. And again, Nick, if you were wanting to know, she's essential in many ways to any good team, because damage and infection's so high, and anyone who plays Resistance will tell you, like, infection can be a real problem because it has a mechanic in it where every few seconds your character will like stagger and cough, and while they're in the cough animation, you can't do anything. You can be locked in this coughing animation. Valerie's healing spray, which is her fever skill, will actually eradicate the infection as well. I was playing a game a couple of days ago where I was Tyrone. There was a lot of monsters in this particular game, and I was taking a lot of damage and a lot of infection, and I had a Valerie who was just support healing all the way through, and it honestly made it was the difference. So I would say Valerie is close to essential as well in a good unit, a good team.
Rob, I think, did you play as Valerie a lot?
I played as Valerie and played as all 4 at various points, but I ended up as Valerie and Jan probably the most out of players a lot of I guess one's like personnel support, one's tech support, essentially. The thing that helps the game is that all the players can be usable. I mean, yeah, you benefit of the game, but also part of the problem, because if you have a well-oiled machine and all 4 people work well, it's great, and you've got a good chance against the mastermind. But the problem is, if 2 of your players or 1 of your players doesn't know the game very well or decides to goof off, then it can make everything.
My friends. Wah, wah.
So one of the characters there you were talking about as well was Tyrone. He's from Raccoon Fire Department, which of course again is mentioned quite heavily in Resident Evil Outbreak, the Hellfire campaign. Now he is defined as the tank character, so he's quite a imposing, bulky character who can take a lot of hits, and he's able to give morale boosts and Comes with a sweet chin music power kick as a kind of melee attack on.
Which is very, very useful. That kick can, whenever they use like the Mr. X or Nemesis and somebody gets grabbed, his kick can actually free you from that attack. And I've seen that used so many times and saved so many players. It's like, oh, thank you. Close call there, especially if you have no ammo or nobody's there to help you. He comes running in, kicks the guy, you're free. Get out of there.
Is it that effective? It can be that effective, can it? Within
Yes.
within the close combat. Yeah. We saw you, Sean. You played a bit as TyranT. You gave me the demo.
My main is like Jill, but a lot of people like to grab Jill as quickly as they can. So TyranT is always my go-to character of the main survivors. It used to be Becca, but I've moved to TyranT since then. He's just a really good damage dealer. Melee's really, really useful in resistance, and he excels in melee quite well. And obviously the kick is so super effective at interrupting a lot of enemies. You can literally run through a door, and if a mastermind has spent time like putting loads of enemies by the doorway of a room, one kick will literally floor all of them. So he's really, really, as a point man, if you like, someone to sort of lead the charge. TyranT, I actually think, is a better character than Samuel, to be honest, because of things like the kick for spacing and whatnot. And he can also knock down doors quicker. A later skill will also allow you to revive teammates better. So he sort of mainly focuses on damage, but there's a lot of like supplement skills which also make him quite essential.
He also has a skill to pick himself up.
Yeah, the second wind. Yeah. Aaron, am I right in saying he's the only character who can do this?
I think so, because if he goes down, he has a chance to get himself up, but he can only do it one time. If he gets down again, that's it.
Yeah, so resistance basically works in that, like, when you run out of health, you go into what's called a down status, which anyone who's played Outbreak, it's the same sort of thing. You have, when you're in down sort of status, there's a timer that goes, and if that expires, then you then respawn with a time penalty to the starting room of that particular level. TyranT's the only character who gets what's called a second wind, which will revive you back to, you are in danger still, but you can drop a heal straight away. Very, very handy. And it's very tactical as well, because you can, what most good TyranT players will do is if they're downed, they'll keep an eye on what the Mastermind's camera's doing, and then if it goes green to indicate the Mastermind's not looking at him anymore, then you'll use your second wind and get back up. There's no point doing it if the Mastermind's got his eye on you, because they'll just use like a turret or something to take you right back down.
Another skill he has is that when he's running, he can't get grabbed by most of the enemies, which is very useful if he needs to get through the area and take them out from behind.
I wanted to ask you guys that have had more experience with the characters and listening to that kick, whether you found it a bit overpowered, because I know that's something that Ao Yang has been quite keen, and there's been a lot of consideration from the development team in terms of getting these measurements right. Because I'm going back to when the beta first came out, I think there was a lot of disparity between the strengths and weaknesses of these special abilities. But I know there's been quite a few patches, and they have worked very hard, haven't they, Ao Yang and his team, to kind of get that balance right. How do you find that in the gameplay, those sorts of things?
In the early builds, I know TyranT was basically the most valuable player, because he could basically, if a TyranT was dropped or Birkin for a net, TyranT could basically make them irrelevant. Now we're in the world of high-ranking masterminds. I don't think TyranT's too bad. But he's definitely essential, I would say, for reasons described.
That's all three so far have been essential.
Well,
Indeed.
That's what I've been saying. I think a good balanced team would require all four of the main players as originally planned, but it all depends on how confident those players are. If you have one person who just decides to go run around willy-nilly shooting stuff and not actually helping the team, not helping towards the goals to get through the
yeah, for example, if you've got a Valerie who runs out the starting room on their own and tries to get a key item and then gets wiped out, then they've not really fulfilled the role that Valerie should do. That's not to say that people can't play the characters how they like, but you just have to respect the fact that within these certain types of games, certain characters fulfill different roles, and to not adhere to those roles, you're not playing that character to the best of their potential.
Yeah, and also the danger there, isn't it, Stars? It's going to affect your gameplay. It's almost going to break the game for the rest of the players. I don't know how much that has an effect, but that's the danger, isn't it, when each particular character has its own special ability. And it's a shame. I don't know if it would work, if it would even come across as an enjoyable experience, but if you could kind of there's an option to play this with kind of vanilla, well, not vanilla characters, but, characters all of the same ability, so that at least, someone that has that kick, for example, that power isn't going to break the game by just, as I would probably do, just run off. Because a lot of these games that I've been seeing do seem quite hectic and almost like just Benny Hill, people just running around like crazy.
Yeah, you're not wrong at all. And I think it's part and parcel of the 4v1 sort of thing. But it is also in tune with, just to give it a bit of context, there was a rumor a long time ago that Resistance was originally called Outbreakers and was a very, very much a sequel to the Outbreak series. And there's certainly, although it's not Outbreak, I'm not saying it is, there's enough of Outbreak's DNA in places that you can see where like the inspiration was from. And obviously Outbreak was the same sort of thing. Every character in Outbreak had different abilities and different starting items, and they brought a different thing to a team. And very much like Valerie, a good Cindy with her ability to like cure bleeds if she grabbed you and have the herb pack, a good Cindy can make the difference between a successful run or a bad run in Outbreak. So it's nice that in some ways they've carried that on in this, even if the characters arguably have less of an identity as such, which I'll get into later.
See how long you can stand still without me shooting you.
Well, we've got another one of the originals, Samuel Jordan. He's a boxer, and he was having medical trials with Umbrella, so a bit of background lore for him. He originates from the Tekken world and has the Fists of Iron as his kind of ability, and it can do dash punches and a bit of a brawler and an adrenaline kind of junkie, if you like, with his melee attacks as well. Are they as effective as Tyrone's kicks?
I have to hold my hands up in the air here, guys. Between him and Martin, I have not really played them at all.
I've only played during the beta period with him. It's pretty much as per label. He's the brawler brute. He's the guy that you want to put in front, hitting and attacking and smashing through where possible to lead the others through. You still all of them are balanced to a point where they're obviously you still need to make sure you're healed, and it's going to be that cliche, but really you need someone like that on the team too for that same.
I just wonder if he's distinct enough from perhaps Tyrone.
He is. He is in the sense that you can attack enemies pretty much direct on without weapon. Someone still do a bit of damage. It's always help.
Samuel is basically like the fighter of the group,
and even his weapon damage is accentuated by it as well because
he does more damage with his fist than most of the weapons. And Tyrone is just basically the shield, and Samuel's the sword. So basically, all Tyrone has to do is give everybody the defense boost and send Samuel out, and he'll just knock all the enemies back. Plus, when he's in his stance, he has the ability where he's unstoppable, where he will not be knocked back as long as his fists are up. And as long as he keeps fighting, he'll be able to get through the lines without being knocked down or anything.
Okay, so he's quite viable then. If again, it goes back to what we were saying. If you know how to play with him, then he can be quite beneficial.
Yeah, because in the beta, when people were playing him, they would accidentally use his abilities too soon because nobody really knows how to use them until it's like, oh, okay, use this when we're surrounded by zombies. There we go.
Yep.
Can't he punch the bio orbs quite successfully?
I think he can. I think he's one of the best damage dealers against them.
I'm sure that's what I remember that.
Boys and girls, come out to play! Bravo!
Okay, well, zipping through now, we're doing well. So the other one, another character, everyone's favourite cosplayer, no doubt, is Becca Woolett, who is a park ranger, apparently. Interesting uniform. She apparently has the ability to have unlimited ammunition for a short period of time. This is her bullet storm ability, so that can be extremely useful, I'd imagine, especially on some of the big BOWs that come into the game to bring them down. She can also help with better aim and target the weaker points of a BOW more effectively. Some of the enemies will drop more ammunition as well, going back to the supply zombie. So
Becca was my initial main, and it really is true that her fever skill, which gives you the unlimited ammo, can be a game changer in a round, but I would say on the whole, she doesn't have that much to bring to the table other than firepower. And sometimes a good resistance session will require more than just simple firepower. You take her guns away, she unfortunately doesn't have that much to offer a team. But keep her equipped, keep her safe, and when the time needs it, You chuck a rocket launcher in her hands, and then she pop. Alex's plant is next to nothing.
You just wanted to play more with me.
Before we get on to the main character, we have everyone's favourite Frodo Baggins lookalike, Martin Sandwich. Probably the greatest character that's ever graced the Resident Evil world. But is he though? He's a mechanic, and he has the ability to cause lots of flashbangs, which. Again, this is very much mechanic, very much made for the online world. But the ability to kind of blind lights within for the Mastermind must be an extremely useful ability to prevent the Mastermind from seeing what's going on. He can also help make a mine and can disarm some of the traps that the Mastermind will lay. So he's got to be the most important character, Sean. Aaron, have you experienced Martin Sandwich?
No, I haven't. I haven't even seen anybody play him in the matches I've been in.
Oh, really? Oh, is he not a popular choice?
No.
Sean said nobody played. He hadn't played him. I can't say I have either.
You have
no, poor old Sandwich is the big letdown. Nobody wants to play. He might actually be really good, but no one knows.
He's got a nice flashbang, which can it's got like a flash wand. Lord of the Rings fans will know it's the Star of Arendelle that he holds aloft.
Nerd!
to blind his foes. Frodo Sandwich Baggins, as Sonny calls him. He looks exactly like Frodo Baggins.
I just think he's the greatest. I think he's the greatest name, and kudos to the Resistance team for calling him Sam.
Unfortunately, no, there are no ad libs to my knowledge that elaborate on if Jill and him were married, it would be Jill Sandwich.
Not yet, anyway.
They always, if they update some dialogue lines.
This is the deadening. Dun dun.
The final survivor you can choose was added post-release, and this included Jill Valentine, who was brought into the game. Without sounding and speaking the obvious, she's probably the most popular choice of character when selecting. Where in all the games I've watched, everyone is seemingly rushing to get Jill fairly expeditiously. Now, Nicole Tompkins reprised her role as Jill for this, so she recorded some dialogue, I suspect during the same recording sessions. But interestingly, she's a lot more aggressive, perhaps. Yeah. Her portrayal of Jill is a lot more aggressive than what it is in Remake 3.
She's aggressively casual, like she'll just drop to Daniel that she'll happily kill him or something like that. Very, very, very out of character for Jill.
Yes, yeah. Now she's got a Master of Unlocking skill, which is wonderful. So she can unlock some of the doors. Is it quicker? It's quicker than everyone else.
Yeah. So basically, Jill's Fever skill is I think it's called Star's Armory, and you can customize what it means. It can you can when it's running, as in when it's active and ready to fire, you can change its various properties, and one of it is the Master of Unlocking. So when your Star's Armory is charged up, she can unlock because the Mastermind can lock doors in stages. So the first lock can be knocked down with a couple of shoulder shoves or one kick from Tyrone. But when you get the more higher ranked Masterminds, they can put a higher level lock on the door, and Jill can unlock any really, really quickly if she's got the Master of Unlocking skill, which is really fitting and it's really neat. But this was actually patched in later. It wasn't part of Jill's initial build, but it's very cool.
And, of course, fans of Jill will know that she also gets a Samurai Edge as a special weapon for her.
Yep, so one of the Star's Armory, the first Star's Armory skill that you have as a default is the Samurai Edge, which gives Jill the ability to use the Samurai Edge, which is a super high-powered pistol for something I think it's 8 shots or a limited amount of time. So if the time expires and you haven't fired the shots, you lose the shot. So it's better to get it used as quickly as you can. What can I say? It's kind of what they should have done with the Samurai Edge in the main game. It's kind of sad that Resistance gets the Samurai Edge and the importance of it, and what it means to a Stars member to wield one more than the game that Jill sort of stars in. Further Stars Armory is the the M66 rocket launcher, I want to say, from Resident Evil 3, the quad-barreled one.
The quad one, yeah.
That's her second power-up for the Stars Armory that you can unlock later.
Oracle, a fan of Jill in this?
I played her during practice runs, but every time I encountered a Jill, they quit.
Oh, what do you mean?
The person that plays Jill quits the game. They just leave the match. Every time I found one, they just leave the match.
Oh, well, they don't complete the levels.
No, they'll just go up to the door and die, then leave the game.
How very strange.
Joke characters are the ones that like to run ahead.
I would guess, my guess is that a lot of people who just started the game the first time, and they go, "Oh, Jill's in this," and pick Jill, and then when they realise what the actual game is, go, "Oh, yeah, I don't like this."
I think that's a good point. Yes.
Don't like this. Delete.
As I said earlier, there needed to be more crossover incentive. Like, they looked at these two things as two separate things to put out together in the one packet, but I think that was a big miscalculation. I think they should have intertwined the two a lot more, and I think it would have encouraged people who played the game to play Resistance.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
Things from the main game that you unlock gives you certain perks and bonuses in Resistance, and conversely, things that you do in Resistance would give you some extra perks or abilities or re-unlockables, and I think that would have been a smarter way to do it.
Are we surprised that we don't have any more survivors available yet? Perhaps more recognisable characters? We're just limited to Jill.
I'm extremely surprised they've not put Carlos in yet. I thought that would be like a dead given as soon as Jill was put in. But yeah, I am surprised there hasn't been more playable characters patched in yet. I'm almost expecting an Outbreak character to return, in all honesty.
I suppose the question that listeners may be asking, because we've gone through through the characters and survivors, and they've all got particular roles. Is there any other more traditional roles in perhaps 4v1s that hasn't been taken yet that a new character could fulfill? Because you don't want to just be adding characters for the sake of it. They need to be different and be able to differentiate from the others and have a particular role. Is there anything missing?
In all honesty, I've got to be honest, I'm not well versed enough in this genre of 4v1 to know that, regrettably.
The idea, I guess, is when you start adding bonus characters is that their abilities should usually slot into somewhere for something that exists somewhere else, but it's done in a different way. Like, try to explain this a way. So if, perfect example. So Martin can blind the cameras with his flashbangs, which is much like January can also disable the cameras in a different way, but they have the same outcome with different approaches. So the idea is that anyone you get should at least have an alternative version of a main ability of one of the characters, so that you don't imbalance the game. So Carlos could be another brute force character, but maybe trained with weapons. He would be more of as alluded to earlier, the kind of the armed sword. He'd be an arm who's good for taking down enemies from a slight distance and supporting the brute character, for example.
Okay, so there is scope then. Well, on the other side of the camera, so to speak, we have the Masterminds, and why, my god, most of them are already recognisable characters, but I think it's only fair that we start with the new character of Daniel Fabron.
What is the worst that could happen? Oui? How the fuck does this thing work? The trader I got it from was very shady.
It looks like he stepped out of the 1996 Resident Evil game, more so than perhaps the 2019-2020 game. He is the most cliched villain I think we've had in donkeys. Perhaps he's on par with Alfred, I suppose, in terms of...
No, don't you dare. No, because Alfred wasn't a complete parody of himself, or of just a generic caricature. Sorry to jump on.
I think that was right to jump.
Bonjour, mon amis.
But can I just say, actually, the only reason I did that I just wanted to quickly say, because when you just at the very mention of his name, and I started laughing in myself, and I can remember Rombie making some great impressions of him on a previous podcast. But then I just suddenly thought, actually, no, because it just sets the whole bloody tone of the game. And if perhaps a more intelligent decision would have been to have utilised one of these fantastic antagonists that we've had in the past, like Alex Wesker, for example, that was demised too soon, to actually have them as the mastermind.
Well, we've got Alex,
really, a real insidious, sinister, or like you just said, Alfred, with his playground of nightmares.
How fucking dare you, Paul, say this about me?
But the thing is, I don't even mind the idea of someone new as long as it didn't act like a complete fucking moron. He's a terrible character. Why they thought this was a great idea.
And it does inject almost comedy into it in a carry-on style.
It does, and again, it doesn't encourage people to play, because they're just like, this guy's going, well, you shit, well, shit. And, and they're like, what the fuck is this French guy doing? Like, I don't understand this. And, like, I don't want to deal with this crap. And then they quit the game. Like, I would. If it was the first time I was playing it and I didn't know what I was getting into, and all of a sudden I have this French guy, like, yelling and swearing at me, I'd be like, I don't need to play this crap.
Like, it gets worse because now, some obnoxious masterminds, and some of you listening will know who you are, start spamming the taunts. They literally, there's no cooldown, which is the time between you using a skill and you being able to use it again. There's no cooldown between masterminds being able to use taunts. Like Nikolai, for example, has got this fucking really irritating laugh, and some masterminds will literally just spam it through the entire match.
Oh my
and when you've got like a Daniel character doing Daniel's taunts all the way through a game, it is just like you just want to mute it. Honestly, you literally want to throw your controller at the TV. It's so frustrating. I mean, it works in a sense. The mastermind's trying to derail the survivors, but they do it in a way that is literally soul-destroying. It's not just impeding your progress; it's literally making you lose the will to live, or at least play the game.
And like you say, a simple patch would
just give it like 10 seconds between doing taunts or something. Not just so they can spam it repeatedly. Because Christ, it is hard. Well, you wouldn't think it gets to you, and at first it seems almost comical and amusing, but by the time you've listened to it for 15 minutes straight. It is, yeah.
I assure you, you fucked that up. In case you were doubting it.
UK, United Kingdom listeners who have an affiliation or have watched in the past Hello, will probably be familiar with someone like Fabron. Obviously, the French actor, it's not French. He is not. It's English. Trying to speak French.
It's like an English person doing their impression of a real stereotypical French.
Of a real stereotypical French, which is hello.
Yeah, my flatmate is French, and if I did that to him, be offended. He would just be like,
no, it is like semi-racist, isn't it? Yeah.
Let's just admit it. Daniel's doing that accent to please Alex. Bonjour, mon ami. Ooh.
We had comedians like Daniel Fabron in the 1970s, like Jim Davidson amongst them. I'm sure It's just we thought we'd moved on from this.
I think if his character came out in like the original Resident Evil, you'd have given it as pass as just part of the kind of cheesy dialogue of the original game. This feels so out of place. Fabron is like a relic from the bygone era of cheesy dialogue.
Which is maybe what they're going for, and that's fine, but it kind of era's moved on since then.
The way I see it, since this is taking place in 1998, they're going with the 90s vibe for this character, so, yeah.
Oh dear. Well, before
What there is more fun ahead? Oui?
What is this motherfucking shit?
My boy Yori.
Oh, God.
Now, interestingly, he can... All masterminds, as anyone who's played it know, that they can control... They've got their special ability. In this case, they can control Mr. X. I don't like the fact that he's called Mr. X. I also don't like the fact that...
Mr. X, Trenchy...
I don't mind Trenchy.
The funny thing is, Nick, the game is non-canon, so it doesn't matter.
That's we'll come.
We don't care about the canonicity of this game. Please enjoy our little French boy.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter. Call him the big guy. It doesn't matter.
We'll come to the canon issues a bit later on, but he can control Mr. X and bring him into the action. Not quite as dangerous in this that he is in.
I still like Daniel because he's a unique character.
Do you think out of all the new characters, he's got the most personality just because he's so ridiculous?
Yes.
The funny thing is Nick, with that question, is you hear so much more of Daniel. So you learn more about his personality. With Outbreak, each character had like ad-libs and they had like starting cutscenes and finishing cutscenes for a scenario. In Resistance, there's none of that. All you get is literally like a starting quote from the character and a finishing quote when they end. Even though you spend time playing as these survivors, I would argue you actually know very little about them in terms of a personality. Whereas at least you do get some of that with Daniel.
Because of all
because they can just spam taunts or... you hear their voice throughout the entire game. I could tell you quite a bit about like Yoko or Alyssa, but I could tell you next to nothing about Valerie or January, because you don't get anything about them in the game. They don't have an end cutscene whenever you finish a level or anything like that. You just get one quote as they run off into the light. That's not enough. Whereas Daniel, for better or worse, you hear his voice through the entire round of it, entire game.
Yeah, to me, for some reason, you don't feel really connected with any of the survivors or the other masterminds, but with Daniel, you just feel like, just like a guy who's just expressing himself more through this. Because when you play the survivors, they hardly express themselves. They'll express some frustration, but they don't really put too much emotion into themselves.
Detecting Aaron, you're a bit of a fan.
I like Daniel. I always liked him because I like how his personality is. He's like, I got to impress Miss Alex Wesker. I got to do what I can. Why do I get a Transylvania accent when I'm French?
We'll never understand that French sophistication.
Is it the over top like mustache twirling villain? Because let me just go on a brief aside and a bit of a plug for your podcast, GT. You're going to be doing the top trumps of Resident Evil. Aaron's running Survivor. Survivor in it has Vincent Goldman, who is the OTT. You are a good boy, lot. Is Daniel not cut from that same cloth?
You're absolutely right, Stars. But at least, and this is the thing that kind of stops me engaging with these characters or kind of wanting to find out more. They do obviously have that disadvantage that you mentioned. The Outbreak characters, they were put into a universe that that was already beloved by us and we understood and we were already interested in. Obviously, with this one, with Resistance, it's not really in universe area that kind of has a proper standing in the narrative. I know we're going to discuss the canon issues, but it's quite a cheap and superficial inclusion into the canon, whereas if this had actually been a location that we already knew, a proper location that was about, the RPD or something, or just Raccoon City, why couldn't this have taken place in a different part of Raccoon City?
Oui.
Oui.
Other masterminds we have, though, making a welcome return is Annette Birkin,
who is played by her Resident Evil 2 RVA.
Yes,
Karen Strassman.
Thank you. Yeah. Re-edit that, Nick, so it's slick, will you, please?
See, we knew there was a benefit getting you guys on.
I just very quickly, obviously don't put this in. What was quite amusing was Karen had no idea what it was for, or in terms of just Capcom really didn't kind of give her. She was asking me questions about Resistance, and we were having to kind of literally send her like the wiki page for it just to give her an idea, because she was given very little guidance in terms of, and it kind of goes to show in terms of how much direction they gave her in terms of bringing the character back. Obviously don't put this in, but
why not? It's good.
Yeah, she really didn't quite actually understand when it was coming out, what it was about, what game it was attached to, how it was connected to RE2, and it was quite embarrassing. We were just having to tell her stuff that Capcom really should have told her, let her know about.
So I might keep that.
Yeah, anyway, yeah.
So she's able to control her husband, like most marriages, and she can.
Whoa!
Nick.
So she deploys G, who I'm not. We've played a lot of games, and not once did we come across Annette deploying G, which is a bit unfortunate.
Can be tough.
I was going to say he must be more tougher than Mr. X.
Well, yeah, a good Annette player can do some serious damage with Birkin, unless you've got survivors who know how to, dispatch these BOW playable bosses.
And does it stay the same mutation G? It's just G2.
Yeah, it's G1.
Is it G1?
Is it G1?
I think so.
Yeah, G1. Yeah, it's just the lead pipe wielding.
Pipe one,
yeah, G1. It's fine, but that's not Annette's best skill. Wait till you go against the hunters. That can't be. The lickers that can't be killed.
Explain.
A high-ranking Annette can deploy lickers that are, I don't even know what health pool they have, but I've been literally in rounds where we've been dishing out damage and they will not go down. I don't even know what kind of hit points they must have.
Oh, well, that sounds fun.
in a latest update, she has a couple of neat lore references. Obviously, we're going to get into the lore lately, but she has now an Epsilon strain skill,
yes,
and a Viact skill. But fear not, lore fans, it does not create Crimson Heads in Resistance. It just basically powers up zombies that she chooses to infect with the Viact.
So you're prayers were answered, George, when they introduced Alex Wesker into this game as well. Alex Wesker is another mastermind in this game. She has an interesting role in this. So she's using it very much like as a kind of fear experiment. So they did manage to bring back the voice actress from Revelations 2.
Mary Elizabeth McGlynn.
Thank you very much.
Which we don't officially know, but we all know is her.
Yes. It's that. So that was the welcome. Her kind of specialist BOW is a Yativo, which is basically an advancement of Plant 42. Unable to move, but you can strategically place the said plant in a given area, and Yativo can kill you off in one hit.
If it gobbles you up, yeah.
It can gobble you up, very Hunter-Gatherer style-esque, and dishes out quite a lot of like a plant acid being flung at you, and can then reel you in, can't they, with a kind of tentacle vine thing.
A good Alex player who deploys that in the right place can cause some serious damage.
You would think strategically the most obvious place would be to deploy it right at the end where the exit is, but that's not always the best point. If you've all survived at that particular point.
Did one of my last rounds allow me to squeeze past it and
yes.
get to the end? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's, I think, as you said, a good mastermind will think cleverly as to where is the best place where you can drop a immovable object, because it does take up quite a large space on the screen. I think it's just the obvious way to go. Oh, well, chuck it at the end, but that's not always the best place to go. So yes, Alex.
And if I'm recalling right, she can make it invisible for a little bit of time, so she can switch back to the cameras and place stuff.
I did not know that. That's neat.
So I was doing a playtest using her, and you had the option to place the creature down. I did that, and it's like, switch to camera mode or go stealth mode, and you click that, you go back to camera mode, and you can do stuff, and then switch back to the her BOW.
That's very
I'm
cool.
trying to remember what that skill is called, though. Or it's probably the plane's ability instead of Alex's skill.
So that gives a bit more flexibility as to what you want to do in there.
It is worth saying with Alex, that the art style for the Masterminds is wonderful, and Alex looks particularly brilliant. They've done a really good job of sort of capturing Alex. We haven't got a lot of art to do with Alex, even in Resistance 2. There wasn't a great deal of Alex art pre her mutation in that game. So what we've been given in Resistance is really cool. She looks fantastic, actually.
I would agree. Yes. I remember when her art was released, everyone was going around going, "Who does she look like?" And every Hollywood actress was being.
The name that came up the most was Ali Larter.
Yeah, she does look a bit like Ali Larter. Yeah, she does. So, also making a return to the series is Spencer. It's his first playable role, ironically, in this game, and you can play as him, not sounding particularly like Spencer from Resident Evil 5, but he's younger, so you can give him a bit of a pass.
Younger.
Younger, yeah. But his role is. I think it's a huge missed opportunity with Spencer. I mean, if you're going to have Spencer as a mastermind, we need to be at Spencer Mansion. It just goes without saying. Or at Spencer Estate in Resident Evil 5. I'm partial to both. Doesn't matter which. Now, my initial thought with Spencer was that, well, then you could have like the Guardians of Insanity or the Blobs, whatever you want to call them, from Resident Evil 5. But I understand where they're coming from with some of these. They need to try and make the kind of like big element of the mastermind somewhat different, which is why Alex has kind of got the Yativo, when it would have been perhaps more obvious to perhaps give her like the TyranT from the Ouroboros TyranT from Revelations 2, but that would have been very similar to perhaps what Mr. X or G was. So Alex got Yativo. Spencer, you could have easily given him the Blobs, but how different would that have been? What challenge would that have presented to the survivors who perhaps have been able to get, to be able to deal with Mr. X and G? So this time Spencer's able to set up force fields and other areas which cause problems, but that's throughout every kind of level and every kind of area, as I understand.
I'd love to think it's a canon issue, but in terms of Capcom being that and conscientious, but I doubt it, because weren't those Guardians a lot to do with, sort of experiments that he was doing there and then on that,
Oh, no, that's fine. But my point was that, that when setting up different BOWs as the kind of like end, is your kind of controllable character or whatnot in Mastermind, I think they're trying to set up different characters to have different skills.
Okay, yeah.
So, it's easy to go, well, if they're going to do, Nikolai can have Nemesis, we'll have Albert Wesker as a Mastermind where he can control the TyranT, T002 and whatnot. We can have James Marcus and he can control Proto-TyranT or whatever. There's all sorts you could do, but there's got to be a bit of a difference between them. And this is
Yeah.
where, to make
I suppose you're right, because those are almost his signature BOWs, aren't they? Because
so
most were kind of almost secondary infectants in the Spencer match, and those were actually kind of his own creations, weren't they? The Guardians.
So Spencer's abilities in this is more of a technological advancement rather than biological in his ability. So we encountered a few of them, a few Spencers during our playthroughs.
Spencer in Resistance has been inspired by almost like Paul Anderson, because his where he lacks in like tyrants or nemesises or plants, he gets like a laser field.
He's forceful,
and his later ability of that will give you a moving laser field. So unfortunately, the survivor characters can't backflip or spin like Leon or the characters in Umbrella Chronicles. So if you're within its field as it passes through you, you will die, or you'll go into the down state. It's disappointing, in all honesty. You think with the wealth of sort of lore behind Spencer, that's the sort of best
they can do with him. Yeah,
you'd like to think they'd give him something unique. So obviously, Daniel took the Tyrant, and the Nemesis, wouldn't fit. Yeah, you guys were just discussing the blobs from Lost in Nightmares. Could have been one like that. You could have deployed, or just something, anything. But a laser field is just.
Perhaps 2 blobs make it a bit more interesting. That would have made it a bit more challenging. But
it's whereas Spencer as a whole is a little bit underwhelming as a character altogether. He specialises in like locking doors and manipulating cameras. And I know someone said on our Discord once, what sums up Resident Evil better than disabling cameras and knocking down doors, and they're kind of right. Yeah, it's a little bit disappointing.
And then the final mastermind we've got is one of the most recently added. Came with the Jill package, so it's Nikolai being almost like her opposing mastermind. And you already mentioned he has a funny laugh, and that's the voice actor as well from Resident Evil 3 Remake. He's reprised his role as Nikolai, and I think you told me, Sean, that you felt that he was almost like less Russian in this.
Neil Newbern, I thought, did a great job as Nikolai in Remake 3. I thought he sort of encapsulated the character of Nikolai pretty well. Whether you agree with some of the choices they've made with the character, I don't. In Remake 3, I thought the actual sort of performance capture and voice acting work was relatively well done. However, when a mastermind plays as Nikolai, it can be unbearable, and this continues on from this sort of spamming of taunts and things like that. Neil sounded good as Nikolai in Remake 3, because Nikolai's appearances are quite short and snappy, so he doesn't overstay his welcome. When he's a mastermind, literally preying down on you for a 10-15 minute gaming session, it is unbearable to hear that accent for much longer, in all honesty. It's taken what was a sort of strong Nikolai performance and turned it into an almost unbearable parody that, you guys mentioned hello earlier. It seems horrible to almost say, because I don't want to trash anyone's performance or anything like that.
I think we can hear it coming through in what you're saying. You're talking about more rather than his personal performance. It's where they've put his performance. It's
just to hear that sort of faux Russian accent repeated over and over and over again through sort of taunts, and the repetition of it just gets unbearable. And like I say, he does this like over the top James Bond villain laugh, and I've been in at least 2 or 3 sessions of Resistance where the mastermind player just spams that for the entire match, and it full respect to Neil, but I never want to hear his voice ever again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's kind of, in an indirect way, it's kind of, this is awful to say, but it's harmed his performance in Remake 3 as a result, if you know what I mean, because I now look at that performance and don't think as much of it as I did prior to playing Resistance. So it's actually had a negative effect on like the game it's accompanying in some way.
I would love to have the original Nikolai. Sly, mysterious, cutthroat till you figure it out, and it's like, oh, he's the bad guy, not this. I'm the bad guy. I like money.
Not now. I'm busy.
Halfway, still so far to go.
So they're the kind of characters we've kind of like gone through. That's actually been a really, really interesting discussion, actually, looking at all the elements. So if we move on to talk a bit more about the gameplay, I'm conscious of the fact that it's incredibly hectic, and this is what George, this is your kind of main point, that you did. Everyone is running around a bit like headless chickens. So it shouldn't be like that, but it often is. So how does that play out to your average player? Is it off-putting? And I think we're kind of getting into the issues of the matchmaking for new players. Is it you're almost like thrown in as like a baptism of fire, should we say, if you've never played it before, and the mechanics aren't quite the same as like Remake 3. So in theory, you've played Remake 3, then you go, oh, I'll now play this. But there's lots more buttons you need to know about. You need to know about the skills, and the tutorial mode's pretty dire. Is it unfair for new players?
I mean, when you put it like that, it sort of feels absolutely. And you wonder, I mean, I'm not familiar enough with the game whether there sort of should be nursery levels that, like, ease players into it. But also, again, it's difficult. I feel you can't really hold this against the developers, that a lot of a successful game is going to come a lot down to, who's in that, who's utilizing the different characters. When I've heard in the past USS Command talk about, his beloved game, Operation Raccoon City, and how, when people that actually have an appreciation for the characters, for the different abilities that Wolfpack had, if they're all in a game together, then it runs at its optimum level of enjoyment. And I imagine, if people that are looking to get out of the game, what Stars is looking to get out of the game, and if you're all in there, if you arrange to meet in a lobby and you all go in at the same time, then I'm sure it's going to be quite a great experience. But like you say, if you just want to turn it on once for, if you've been playing RE3 and you're not part of a kind of extended Resident Evil community, and you're just picking up to have a good time, then I think it's almost going to be, you're more likely than not to just get this kind of headless chicken, hectic thing, and people are going to play it very briefly and then just put it down and never come back to it again.
Well, this is what Aaron was showing. It looks like people are playing as Jill, going through the first door and going, nope, and then, and then switching off. But is that not a bit, I don't want to say neglectful, but a bit of an oversight when making the game?
It's a bit unfair for new players, especially if you're just starting out as a mastermind for the first time, and then you encounter like level 600 this character, 50 this character, then all of a sudden you're like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to beat him. 2 of them just left the game. Why? It's not fair, because you want to try it, but then players start leaving because they don't see you as a worthy opponent or some sort.
Oh, really? Do you think that's what's happening? They're just going, it's not worth my time.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, this is a new player, so we're going to just quit the game so they don't get points for killing us. There's no point in playing this. They're probably not even knowing how to play and stuff like that. What they should do is, if you're starting out for the first time as Mastermind or Survivor, they should give you the same rank level. Like you can find a level 2 or level 3 character, match up with the low level players and low level masterminds, so you can just learn experience of how to do it. The practice matches you can do are limited because the survivors in the practice matches don't move.
Right.
So if you get like a low-level matchup and you're a low-level, that'll be perfect, because it'll be like a training session. Everybody's going to go at their own pace and they're going to try and figure things out. So will the masterminds. And then once you guys complete it or lose, then you got experience on how to play. Instead of, run, gotta go, well, wait for me.
Yeah.
Why are you on the ground? Get over here. We're done with the puzzle. I just got started.
It does seem like a level 70 Mewtwo going up a level 3 Caterpie.
Nick, when you asked before, like, is it an oversight? I mean, I'm trying to think, what could they have done to sort of a nursery level? But in terms of, people coming in and actually playing the game as it was meant, in terms of, effectively utilizing the individual abilities of each character.
Well, there is a tutorial mode, but as I said, it's rubbish. It's not even worth being in it. But my concern is, I wonder if they've forgotten a bit that Resident Evil is a single player campaign. It is supposed to be a single player experience, and suddenly you're kind of thrust into this, and you're like going, as we discussed, it is very much a teamwork based encounter. To suddenly do that, and as and you're running around doing whatnot, but does it just go back to the matchmaking skills or the lack of? Because Sean, would you say, Sean, that if you do have a team that you've organised on Discord or whatnot, you've got your community, you've got your 5 people playing, does it transform the game?
Yeah, I think. I mean, obviously, you don't plan your 5th player. That's not going to happen. So if you've got your 4 main players, I think a good team of well-ranked, well-skilled survivors can take on any mastermind. However, that's such a rarity, and it does get to a point where the masterminds get so high ranked that it can make the difference, even if the survivors are well organized. Resistance has been through a rough time where it's only just started coming back the other way, where masterminds had a very good run in the updates of being very, very benefited with some of the latest patches. And there has been a lot of outcry from the community that it's gone a bit too far one way. Of course, Mastermind players will tell you that survivors have had it easy for such a long time. This is the nature of a 4v1 game, where the 4 versus the 1 will always tell you that the other party is less balanced and more unfair than theirs. And which is why you'll never truly balance it all the way. But it can get soul destroying. These masterminds that play now are of such high level, and because the player base has dropped off, the matchmaking arguably doesn't work the way it should do. If it had a wealth of players to be able to pull from, then it probably would be better. But if the matchmaking's been able to put like 4 survivors that are around the same rank together, that's like a gift in itself, because the player base has dropped. This is mainly more on the PC. There's still quite a few people playing it on the PS4, but for the PC community generally, it's not uncommon to like get a rank 34, rank 60, rank 89, rank 3 survivor against a rank 256 Spencer. That team is not going to beat that Spencer. That especially if they're randoms, it's just not going to happen. And that's not necessarily down to the matchmaking being broken. That just might have been the only mastermind available to pitch against those survivors. This is what happens when a player base just drops off.
That was really good, Sean, because that was exactly the issues that I saw being brought up almost immediately, and then I saw the development team actually specifically address this and mentioned that had been rectified. I think some of the very first earliest patches, didn't they? They dealt with this disparity, but so it's important to know from someone like yourself that's still playing the game that still needs to be addressed.
But can you address it now? This is the thing. If the player base just drops off and there are no new masterminds playing, if the only masterminds that are left for like the matchmaking program or algorithm they've got can pull from is a 256 Spencer, then that's who you're going to get, because their goal is to get the survivors playing, rather than leave you in a lobby indefinitely. I mean, when I did the stream for Nick the other night, we weren't waiting too long, Nick, in all honesty, were we? I can't think like a single matchmaking session lasted any longer than sort of 30 seconds to 2 minutes, let's say. But the range of masterminds you got varied from like a rank 3 Annette to the rank 256 Spencer. There was no continuity within it. You could literally have a mastermind as low as like rank 1 to 10, and the next one is over 200. And I don't necessarily want to blame the matchmaking. I just think players are simply not available. I can't, obviously I don't play the PS4 version very much, so people listening will probably say, well, this is not really reflective of my experience on the PlayStation 4, and for that I apologise. Just not had a chance to test it extensively.
There's things they could do that you could have the matchmaking where it's levels, so that if you're level 1 to 20, you're only going to play levels of 1 to 20. But yeah, you go back to your point that there's got to be that player base, and that, more importantly, that continued player base, in order to continue to get level 20, up to level 20 masterminds. But to me, that seems an obvious addition to have right at the beginning, so that you're not going up against ridiculously high-powered survivors and masterminds when playing, especially as a new person. In my very, very limited world of competitive matches, I only ever play Pokemon. In Pokemon, everyone gets set to level 50. If you've got a level 25, level 36 Charizard that you've just evolved or whatnot, and then you go and play online, that will get bumped up to level 50, so it's all its stats will increase, and then you're facing off perhaps against like a level 83 Nidoking, but his stats.
I never thought I'd be on a podcast and hear these names.
Well,
Nidoking. What was the first one?
Nicky loves it, doesn't he? It's just
it's true.
Even the podcast has to go into Nick mode for a few minutes. It's absolutely beautiful.
I know Pikachu, but that's it.
Well, these are all cool, but they bring the Nidoking or whatnot will be level 83, but they'll bring it down to 50, so you're on a level playing field.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Which is good. Which perhaps wasn't always work because obviously you do need to be rewarded for your continuous play. But there could be a mechanic in that where you have it all, where levels are all set. So
you know what, Nick? You've cracked it. Actually, I've never even thought of that before. But yes, they could have active scaling on the Masterminds. So it works out like the base average of the survivors, and then ranks the mastermind. This happens in MMOs. To the non-educated, the massive multiplayer online games, can have scalable levels based on the instance or the the activity you're choosing to do. There's no reason why that kind of mechanic can't exist within Resistance.
Well, it just seems logical, doesn't it? I mean, they've been doing that since Pokemon Red and Blue, as the way it works. So and that could be a good way of, bringing people into it, because you've then got arguably a chance of winning, even if you're new to the mechanics of the situation. You may find then you can play through your characters in ease. I still think there should be a almost like a better tutorial mode, and maybe even almost like a single player campaign. I don't want to say that because it's not true, but the ability to, and I think you spoke about this actually on the stream with Umbrella Corps. You can you can explore some of the areas. I think that would be a good little thing you can do. So as a new player, I mean, when I played, I ain't got a clue what was going on. Everyone was running off, and I was like, well, I don't know where. I've told you how I play Resident Evil. I don't know what room's going in. The map's not as accessible as it is in Remake, and things like that. So I think you should be able to explore the environments as well, just to have a good look around, just to get to know what's going on, and that's for Mastermind as well, because you want to be able to have that freedom in your own time to be able to think, well, if I put a camera there, I'll get a good view of that angle, and then if I can put a camera there, I can see that. A bit more meticulous planning. I just don't think you get that. That'll be my changes, but that I'd imagine would require fundamental reprogramming.
Well, you say that, but MMOs and stuff that they constantly rebuild themselves. It's not as unfeasible as you would think.
Because I think this is a big point that on paper it's not a bad little concept, but we've said that before. We've said that about Operation Raccoon City. We've even said it to an extent about Umbrella Corps, but they've all been quite poor in their execution. And so we kind of go back to the bigger question that's going to be asked about Resistance, is to whether it's actually a good 4v1 game, or does it still need quite a lot of substantive work? Because it's got, in order to get more people in, people who like 4v1 games will need to play it. Because they can't, and they should never rely on Resident Evil fans playing it, because most Resident Evil fans just want a single player survival horror experience. And this is multiplayer, all action, no horror. It's a total opposite of what you want, which is fine.
Yeah.
But you're going to need to, so you'll get Resident Evil players playing it to experience it. But you're going to need the casual fan or the Resident Evil, yeah, it's not bad. Oh, it's got a 4v1. Oh, I love 4v1s. You're going to need them in. It didn't work with Operation Raccoon City. It certainly didn't work with Umbrella Corps. Is it working with Resistance? And arguably, PC's the biggest market for this type of game, and as dead as a dodo.
I don't think it is, which is why I think long before the servers will shut for this game, I think you'll either see it go free to play or it will get a standalone digital release for reduced fee. I would not be at all surprised if they announce that, like, for £15 it gets you your starter pack, which is like the 4 beta survivors, and you have to like maybe buy Becca and Martin as a bolt-on. That that kind of thing. There is potential in this product. I've talked with Al Yang a couple of times, and I've shared a couple of the Easter eggs that I've spotted. There's a clear love for the franchise, a love for Capcom in this. We're going to get into the sort of specifics of it later, but ambition or budget. That's
I was going to say,
continually ask.
A perfect segue then into the kind of canon issues.
What is this shit? This is some dead person.
So George was concerned. We'll come to George in a minute about his concerns, but it's raised a lot of debate in the kind of like online community and whatnot about where this game fits in terms of its canonicity.
If you look at Jill's information on her character in this game, it pretty much says it's just a nightmare.
Yes and no. I say that because we had this exact same conversation with Sean. Doesn't it say in the bio? I haven't got it at hand, but yeah, she mentions that she was having almost like nightmarish fever dreams. But then it says in the same thing. It then also says, but then it is actually reality or something like that.
Yeah, she says gradually she begins to realize the never-ending loop of nightmares are actually, in fact, very, very real.
So it's hard to decipher exactly what the precise intention is here. But when it was released, obviously it's one of the first questions most fans ask: is it canon? And I think it's very debatable. The actual in-game events certainly aren't. I don't think they cannot be considered canon. What you're actually doing at that time, because it just doesn't make any sense.
Don't make sense.
No, it can't.
Yeah.
You're not being held up in said situation and escaping. But the argument or the discussion point, should we say, is whether the characters are canon and thus the kind of background lore that exists within this Resistance universe is canon, and whether the premise, if you like, of the experimentation, whether not what's happened here is canon or not.
I mean, just a random question in relation to that is then what would be the relationship between the Masterminds? So, obviously, immediately springs to mind the relationship between Spencer and Alex Wesker. So, are you to take it that each individual, for each mastermind, that's an individual scenario? That's the representation of those events, almost like with, say, Remake, where you only ever see like sort of Chris or Jill's. You never kind of see the actual.
I think that the position is what you see in the game is quite non-canon. It's the actual gameplay is non-canon. Spencer is not a mastermind. Alex is not a mastermind per se. So none of that is canon. It's just whether the kind of background information is Daniel Fabron, a canon character, for example. Is Becca Woolett a park ranger of the Arclay Forest? Is Tyrone a member of the federal the Raccoon Fire Department? That type of thing. And then it's like, well, is Valerie Harmon a friend of Yoko's? If so, where does Yoko appear? And it raises all sorts of interesting questions about is it supposed to fit up with the original timeline or the remake timeline, if that is such a thing? And your head just starts to spin.
Yeah.
And there's a simple explanation, isn't there, Sean?
It's not canon, Nick. It is literally as simple as that. I think it has canon ideas within it. At some point, Alex works on T-Phobos at a later point in the timeline. She's got a skill in this called T-Phobos. Batman's already pointed out that it can't take place really within the canon we know. So it's just an Easter egg. It's a reference. It's a neat, it's a name for a skill. We know Jill doesn't have a diversion where she, rendezvous with 6 survivors and fights against Nikolai while he's on CCTV. You can't retrofit this. That's not to say Daniel Fabron can't exist within the canon, but at the moment he doesn't. He's just a character in a multiplayer game.
Do we honestly want him to exist, though? Like, he's such a walking cliche of terrible sound bites.
Yeah. I mean, Nick, as kind of, you did a good job in terms of posing the question, in making that distinction in terms of, in-game events and forget that, but, is this adding value to the lore? And I was slightly kind of with you when you just sort of mentioned maybe someone that would work in Raccoon Zoo and just adds an extra little layer. Just Stars and Rombie, I completely agree with you. It just isn't. It's just simple as that. I know, and I've heard people kind of trying to stick up for the story of Umbrella Corps, and actually, and have sort of suggested that's actually a better story than Resident Evil 7 in terms of if you actually look at what's the actual narrative of Umbrella Corps, what's going on. Yeah, you've got these tests. I'm not saying I agree with that at all. Obviously not. So
I can understand where they're coming from. There's an interesting idea there that perhaps I can see, but it's not like it's well executed. You could have made a story-based game around that, having multiplayer shooter, I guess.
So no, yeah, just these kind of maybe idea. There were facilities, there were tests going on. Yeah, I can get with that, but no, just in terms of how these, like Sean says, how this has all been executed. Not to say that we can't see these characters in a canon situation, though.
And I will say that Kat's confirmed on Discord as well that a lot of these new information, like the T-Phobos skill and the Epsilon strain, are just Easter eggs. So it's been expressly and explicitly stated. That's exactly.
Well,
what it is.
see, I'm not to go against Kat, because I'm sure she's doing it for the right reasons. But the problem, that's out there is everyone's going to go, "Wow, everything's supposed to be, all potential canon, blah blah blah, all versions, all this stuff." And because you can't blankly just go out and immediately deny that everything in there is not canon, it's a slippery slope.
Part of this problem is something that Rob alluded to earlier when he said that it was a big mistake actually separating them, with two separate installs. If this was just an option on a menu in Resident Evil 3 Remake, it would just easily be in many ways dismissed as like Resident Evil 3's multiplayer mode. No one looks at the mercenaries in Resident Evil 5 and think, is it canon that Chris teamed up with Wesker and fought a load of Magini in Kajuju? No one looks at the canonicity of that. No one looks at Operation Raccoon City's heroes mode and goes, at some point, did Leon, Claire, Jill and Carlos meet up and battle Nighthawk, Ada, Nikolai and Hunk, or whatever? That just didn't happen.
I was going to say that's exactly the same thing here. I think it's a pretty hard stretch to say, obviously, Jill met these random 4 people, whoever they are, and teamed together to defeat people in a test thing during the fall of Raccoon City, or before the fall of Raccoon City. It's clearly a non-canon what-if concept, but then people would putting too much weight into every little Easter egg or character or whatever in it, when clearly it should be pretty obvious that it shouldn't be the case. Like, as far as I'm concerned, clearly this isn't a what. This is more of a what if scenario than a what was scenario.
I mean, did Alex Wesker exist in this time? Yes. Did Spencer exist in this time? Yes. So they're alive, and there's a potential for this happening, but it didn't happen. It's just there's canon ideas in it, and it's presented in a non-canon way. It's just meant to be a fun multiplayer experience, everybody. That's literally all it is.
Yeah, and it can't be T-Phobos experiments anyway, because I think, as Batman said, T-Phobos was an accidental discovery almost that was discovered probably much later on, because you then use the island in Revelations 2 to test that, so it wouldn't make any sense now. It also doesn't make sense why Umbrella have called them Lickers, because they were named Lickers by David Ford.
You see, there's been a couple of murky quotes from our delightful Peter Fabiano, who basically said, aspects of Resistance are canon, and that was misinterpreted by various members of the community as actually happening within the canon. And I think what he meant to say, I don't want to speak for him, but how I interpreted was that, again, Alex Wesker is canon. She exists within the timeline, but she doesn't exist within this capacity within the timeline. They've used her as a function, in a sense, for the multiplayer to exist.
I think if you wanted to stretch that thing further, you could probably easily go, Alex Wesker probably tested on people at some point, because she clearly did in the background of later games. So again, you could argue that maybe not this happened, but a concept where she imprisoned some people and used them for test subjects probably did happen in a canon concept. But in this fashion, in the way that this game unfolds, not that way.
Yeah.
Again, this comes to a slippery slope. I think it's just much easier to just be like, this is a wholly non-canon side online game, and making statements like some elements are canon is a muddy thing.
Yeah.
And it's not,
it is.
It doesn't help.
Yeah.
It would be much easier just to not say that. I don't want to turn Fabiano into what's the guy's name? The Silent Hill, Tom Hewitt. I don't want to turn Fabiano into the target of Tom Hewitt levels of you ruined the franchise, because it's not true. That's not true at all. But I think he needs to be thinking about what he's saying in the scheme of where these games are placed, because it's not helping the acceptance of remakes and this content.
I totally agree, and I just think it almost smacks of just trying to get make the game universally appeal to the to us and maybe people that just sort of pick the game up more lightly and just to frankly just to increase sales, to try and make it all things to all people. Just maybe just accept and be confident in the game. Like Sean says, it's just a fun multiplayer game. It doesn't have to be canon. We have our mainline and extended universe titles for that. And I agree with you. I don't think comments like that help at all.
We'll see how it goes. It's whether like someone like Fabron or January or Valerie, they get drawn into the canon in the future. That will then raise some questions, but I think Sean's probably got it right. It'd almost be like what Star Wars do with the Legends versus canon. So something like Resistance would be a Legends item of something that may have happened. That particular idea is plucked from a non-canon material and made canon. But it doesn't mean that everything that person came from is canon. If Valerie was to become canon, doesn't mean that she went through what you play through as her. It just means that she existed in Raccoon City with it as an individual character, and you can play as her in a non-canon game. And it gets back to the point, like if someone like that is then deemed canon, well, does the background lore of Resistance that they've put in the bios, does that become canon? It's going to be quite difficult, and it'll be a bit picky and choosy again, and that's never a good place to be in. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and see how it unfolds in the long run.
Dr. Wesker wants your fear. They want your flesh. I do not give a fuck.
I do want to end on some positivity though, because some of the environments that they've used are quite interesting, and some of the new locations, the kind of maps, if you like. Again, there should be a lot of scope for a lot more areas to explore. So why we haven't got the Spencer Mansion yet, I don't know. Why we haven't got the RPD, I don't know.
Nick, this goes back to something that George Trevor also kind of alluded to in a roundabout way, not in this, but it's like Umbrella Corps had like some invoking environments of past games, and they have decided not to do that with Resistance, which has been quite surprising. I don't know if that's because of how Umbrella Corps went, but I'm quite surprised that they haven't considered the same thing, to be honest. That's probably been the biggest surprise. And even, there's limited elements that they could just take directly from Remake 2 and 3 that they haven't really fully tapped into as well.
Yeah, I asked the other night, why when Nikolai dropped as a content update, why weren't Hunters put in the game? Why have they not put the Hunter beaters in yet? That could be a card deploy, surely. The work's already been done for their mechanics, so all you're doing is putting it in Resistance.
It seems odd. And again, the whole RPD is beautifully realised already. It's a big enough map. You could easily just have ground floor, top floor, couple of rooms, just do the east wing or west wing. It's already done, really, isn't it?
Yeah. You've only got to put a few items on a few moved desks to sort of gate the way through the map, the same way they have done through the casino or whatever. The casino has very open rooms, but what they've done is they've used like furniture and whatnot placed in strategic ways to navigate you through it the way they want, and that would be very, very easy to do. From the main hall into the west office, and whatnot. It would be very easy.
It just seems odd. But the locations we do get, we have an umbrella facility which is very much modelled on Nest 2. Nest 2 is kind of like upper levels, isn't it? With all the cages. It's not quite the same, but it's got that kind of aesthetic and feeling with the kind of lifts that keep go up and down, and it's got the kind of yellow tape and God knows what. I don't find that one particularly interesting, but a lot of the others are a bit more interesting. There's the casino, which is invokes the kind of Revelations casino, which I thought was quite cool. No matter what environment you get, and there's also a remixed version of the uptown downtown areas from Resident Evil 3 Remake, the objectives always stay the same in each of the 3 levels.
Absolutely.
And that's got to be a fundamental failing, is that you always got to collect the 3 keys and whatnot to complete the boss. I think 3 puzzle pieces to unlock the door. You've then got to get the bio orbs or whatever you got to do and destroy them, and that gets a bit repetitive when you're going from different map to map or level to level within the same map.
Yeah, but a bit more variety. I mean, I can understand on the face of for consistency that it's going to make it easier for playing, say, with new people when they don't. Yeah, it's kind of one of those difficult things.
I will give them credit. You know, they've done two remixed maps now. They've done the remixed Uptown map, and they've done the remixed amusement park museum map.
Yeah.
And they've done such extensive work on them that they actually feel like new maps entirely. You know, you can see enough of the old map within them, but they do play substantially differently, and you know, that's to its credit. But the fact that the objectives are the same, it does lead to extremely repetitive gameplay. And some people can play this kind of game all night for hours and hours, and more power to them. I tend to find I'm good for about 2 or 3 sessions. Generally, the amount of time it takes to do your dailies, and then I'm kind of done with the objectives. And this is where I just sort of say, the lack of ambition hurts the game a little bit, because there's so much you could do within this potential. I have even sort of sketched up a few ideas of various ways you could rework the multiplayer in Resistance. Like one of the ideas was like a gauntlet that I had where, the survivors start in one section, the mastermind has to strategically position BOWs and whatnot, and the survivors have to get from like A to B, but if a survivor gets killed, they don't respawn until the next round. So it would be a really clever way of making the survivors work together more, because you only get one life until the next round starts. Just little things like that. But the fact that every game is like keys, security guard, terminals, biocores every single time, it does give the game an unfortunate lifespan, which I don't think will last forever. Some people will disagree with me on that, because multiplayer gaming is a very, very subjective thing.
Aaron, did you want to comment on any of the maps? Do you have a particular favourite?
I like the downtown map because of how it's laid out and stuff, because you actually are on the streets of Raccoon City, and you can get a look around and stuff. But it was also on that map that I found the Birkin family photo and Chief Irons.
Ah.
Yeah, I found them and shared them on Twitter, and Al Yang's like, uh-oh, thanks for pointing this out. And next thing you know, they updated the maps and changed it, and the Birkin family photo is no longer there. I was the only one that pointed it out, too, because if people actually took their time going through the maps, they will find so many interesting details and items and stuff, and maybe even hidden Easter eggs that they intentionally put in there for people to find. But since everybody wants to rush, you don't get to see this stuff. The only time you actually get to see it is if you're playing like on practice mode, where you can take your own time, set your own pace to it, and just look around at all the details.
So why did they remove the image of the Birkin family photo?
Because it was out of place, and it was in the front office there, sitting on the counter like, oh, look, a Birkin family photo. I didn't know the Birkins worked at this warehouse.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay, that's nice. Did they replace it with something, or they just took it out?
Yeah, they replaced it with another photo of an older man, I think it's like probably early 1900s, holding something. I forget, it was like a basket or something. I have screenshots of it if you guys want to see it. And from what I was told, they removed Chief Irons and replaced him with something else, or his chair's empty. Because in that same map, if you go to the office where the one ATM machine-like thingy is, where you have to run the key card, put in the code, in the office there's a body sitting in the chair slumped over. And if you play as the mastermind, you could get a closer look at it if you control a zombie. And it's Chief Irons.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah, so I got screenshots of that too.
So, Aaron, you've been directly contributing to this game.
Yeah. Yep, one way or another.
Excellent. All right.
There is a lot of neat Easter eggs that stretch far and wide within Capcom's works. I mean, I tweeted Al Yang a few nights ago because there's one poster in the new rework amusement park museum map, which has Edward Falcon from Power Stone, if anybody remembers that, Anacaris from Darkstalkers, and there's a big caption that says Turbulent Wind, which is a character in Street Fighter V called Rashid, and his full name is Rashid of the Turbulent Wind. So, that's really neat. And
you showed that on your live stream too.
Yeah, he gave me a kudos for that on Twitter.
A thumbs up,
yeah.
Wonderful.
But there's lots of these in the game. I mean, very, very eagle-eyed people will notice the Baker estate on a poster for a mold cleaning company.
Yes, I saw that.
That is not canon. It's not canon, guys. Calm the fuck down.
Just Easter eggs.
Just Easter eggs. I'm pleased to say we've actually had a call-in. This has come in from one of our supporters. This is coming from Charlie Soundhouse. So Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi gang, so Little Birdie has told me that you're doing an episode in review of Capcom's most impressive feat, making a multiplayer game even less fun than Umbrella Corps, and just like Umbrella Corps, this was so close to being yet another free pass for Capcom to sail into largely undeserved mainstream appeal yet again, as they had done so before with Resident Evil 4 and somehow even the RE2 remake. It's pretty amazing that it's a viable business model for Capcom to just shit all over their own IP for a while before seemingly accidentally hitting a goldmine, bringing in millions of new customers who will never ever play anything else in the series. There's a few too many parallels between Resident Evil and Sonic in that regard, but at least we get rewarded with an RE7 or a Revelations after getting beat over the head by an ORC or an Umbrella Corps. But I think that after remaking Zero, it was a real turning point. We could just have easily have ended up the same way that Sega is, just waiting for the biannual Capcom embarrassment to come out so we can argue things are good. But luckily, things aren't that way, and we've got a mostly thriving series. I say mostly. I've gone almost an entire paragraph, thankfully, without saying the dirty word, so now I'll stop putting it off. Resistance is a decent game, but it's the result of a frankly embarrassing amount of amateurish mistakes. The game as it stands right now, especially on PC, is woefully unbalanced, and you can predict with near 100% accuracy whether you're going to win or not. You're either against a level 4 mastermind who's too busy removing crayons from themselves to lock any doors, or a level 306 Nikolai who can't leave his house at night because the sight of anything stars related triggers him too much, and there is genuinely no in between. I have some very incredibly basic game design knowledge, but it doesn't take a genius to tell you that players with single digit levels shouldn't be up against world famous pro gamer masterminds who eat them for breakfast. This could be incredibly easily solved by a skill based matchmaking system, which I genuinely think is probably included with most online server hosts. Capcom's main issue with skill-based matchmaking is that there's nowhere near enough people who care about the game or play it, especially on PC where online-only live service bollocks like this usually thrives. Which brings us to the second comical misstep. Why even include it with Resident Evil 3? People who want to play the fun online Resident Evil game aren't going to buy a story game they don't like just to get a taste of it, because Resistance sadly isn't worth the price of a full box game. And people who care about classic Resident Evil, or even Remake 2, care about scary single player experiences, so why on earth would they care about the freebie online component you've tacked on? They didn't care when it was a paid add-on for Resident Evil 5's Versus mode, and they're not going to care now. Resistance should go free to play and back itself towards a more lucrative cosmetics-only loot box system. Having to ostensibly pay for a game and then pay for in-game upgrades when the game is already impossible for new players with the gods on the other side of the screen is just about the worst possible thing they could do. I wouldn't care if I had to pay €10 for a bright pink Nemesis jacket or a shotgun-mounted Bobby Charlton. I'd feel okay doing it because I want to look good when I play those epic close games and record the hilarious clips of me getting crushed in a corner. But right now I don't really care how I look when I'm getting pushed from floor trap to liquor like a dog's chew toy, and then I can't help but laugh at the implication that I should spend more money on this game to have a chance to get a burgundy jacket for Samuel instead of a blue one. It's ridiculous. In short, go the League of Legends route, let everyone play for free. Cross-platform would be incredible, but I know it is kind of hard to get going. And then just bleed all the money from people stupid enough to want to pay €100 to put a pretty cute tiara on Mr. X. It's tainted by original sin in the same way that RE3 was. They've replaced innovation for innovation's sake with just doing absolutely nothing. The only thing that Resistance and RE3 Double Team brought to the table was be the first game in the series to retroactively make the game before it look lazier, and in a series where every installment makes the previous one better, that's the real achievement.
I could let you leave. I will not, but I could.
That was a brilliant call.
That was a fabulous call-in. Thank you, Charlie, for that.
It almost reminded me of Zero Punctuation.
Yeah, Yanksy.
The way he was going off like that.
I have to say, he made some very good points, particularly at the beginning, in terms of where the game fits in the series and sort of what it does to the integrity of the series. And I was kind of laughing out loud, but at the same time crying a bit inside. You're particularly that point about beating us about the head, but then occasionally in between each one of those assaults we're getting a Revelations 2 on RE7. It made some very astute points. That was a very good call.
It was, and he makes some really good points we haven't touched upon as well, about some of the cosmetics in this game. I mean, because I almost didn't want to speak about it because it's absolutely horrendous. Some of the costumes and some of the add-ons that you can buy. I say buy, you get the points within the game, so they're not forcing you. But I mean, they're hideous. Some of the zombies look like superheroes wandering around. It's just
We haven't talked about the loot system, and although it's all in game, yeah, the cosmetic chest that you can open is for 500 in-game. 50,000 in-game currency points, and can give you anything random from a survivor skin all the way up to a character individual spray. And there's something like over 150 sprays now. There's no rhyme or reason as to what you're going to get when you hit that unlock button. And, you can get a skin for a character, or you can get 20 sprays in a row. And some of the zombie skins, as you've alluded to, guys, are ridiculous. They vary from gingerbread men to, as you like to affectionately call it, Barney the dinosaur.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe it. I came into your stream the other night, Stars,
Mm.
and I saw these Barneys running around the screen, and and I just actually then suddenly think, is this game? Did they initially go down quite a sensible road of trying to maybe test the water for an outbreak and try and have a slightly more serious tone to it, and then they've kind of further down the line, they've just this game's just become like a parody of itself, and they've just thought, just fuck it, let's just throw everything at it.
That is unfortunately it, GT. The problem is the game is made for today's meme generation, and it's a bit soul destroying when you love something as much as we do.
Yeah.
I've been in games where, like, we're waiting for the final door to open, and I've literally got, we've got like a dancing Mr. X or whatever, and survivors hip thrusting him as we wait for the door to unlock. And I just think, has Resident Evil really come to this?
Yeah,
this is a series that was once about being absolutely fucking terrified of like what was lurking in the darkness. The jump scares used to be horrific. I'm going to open a door and I've got no bullets. I've got a knife. There could be 3 hunters on the other side of this door, and I know I'm not going to survive it. And literally, we've got hip thrusting survivors and a dancing tyrant. And I just think it's kind of moved away from what we initially used to love about this series.
It is a little bit soul destroying, and it's very sad. And look, we all know the people in the kind of the community that may have and still do taken the series far too seriously. I really like to think that the people on this podcast and the people that we've had on this podcast, we strike a fair balance sort of in the middle. We try not to take the series too seriously, but at the same time, because of the way that we're attached to it and we've engaged with it, we do want to see it have a, Capcom treat it with a certain level of integrity. And just what you were knowing the sort of fan that you are, Stars, and you don't by any means take this series too seriously. Imagining you at that point you just said, waiting for the door to open and looking around you, and this is what's become of your it's sad. It really is.
And the thing is, I know I'm old in the tooth when it comes to this fandom now, and I know how like modern gaming is, and I don't want to be that old stickler that waves my walking stick around saying you fucking youngsters don't know what it was like and all that. But at risk of being that kind of person, it's just hard.
Well, look, Sean, just quick, have another look at those sales figures for RE7.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah.
how would you sum up then in terms of your review? We'll quickly go through everyone's comments on review, and then we'll bring this podcast to a close. But again, I say thanks to Charlie for that call. It was really good, really insightful, and
I've always maintained from the first time I played it that Resistance is founded on a solid idea, but there's been a problem that's occurred ever since its initial reveal. That's either, as I said at the very beginning, either been a lack of ambition or a lack of budget. Now, we've all spoken to Al Yang a little bit on the internet. He's very open on Twitter. He's very approachable. He responds to a lot of folks, and I know his passion for Capcom is pretty high. He puts some obscure references. So I don't necessarily think the ambition's a problem. I think they've probably got some really strong ideas that they probably want to bring, into reality. So does that mean it's not being funded properly? And I genuinely don't know where the disparity begins, because there is so much potential for this kind of idea to exist within the Resident Evil universe, and you only have to go on a forum or Twitter or anything like that to see all the ideas that people come up with. Wesker Mastermind in the Spencer Mansion with the 4 stars members. Take the gameplay, adapt it, refit it, make it work, and you've got
incredible.
Imagine a multiplayer game where Chris, Jill, Barry, and Rebecca are playing together, and with Wesker as a mastermind. I know it's not canon; it doesn't have to be canon, but it would be the most joyous gift you could give to the Resident Evil community, couldn't it? Though, let's be honest. And to see like the mechanics are in place, you can do that, and to just them not seize it, it's just it's sad. And instead, we get generic maps that you can't piece together. They're based on real locations, but you're never running around an actual game location. Even though we've had 2 full, RE engine games in 2 Make and 3 Make, you don't actually go around any of those locations in Resistance. It all just feels a bit empty and a bit half-baked. There's so much potential. Do I put the blame at the developer? Do I put the blame at Al Yang? I actually don't in this case, because I think through his Easter eggs, through the things that they put in the skills, and I think there's ambition there to really want to push this. They put Alex Wesker and Spencer as playable characters. They put Jill in the game. They've made Outbreak references. There's a clear love for the lore and the world they're building this game within. You don't put an Outbreak reference in there unless you know what you're doing. But there's certainly a disconnect. There's a lack of sort of wanting to really go for it. It's funny because Resistance originally turned up as Project Resistance, and at that point, it seemed like it was going to be its own title, its own sort of thing. And then the reaction to the beta was quite poor. I don't think there's many people that would disagree with that. And then the next thing we know, it's being bundled into Resident Evil 3. Was that reactionary to the feedback from the beta? I don't think we'll ever truly know. I would love to sort of quiz Al Yang, and I'm almost certain he wouldn't be able to tell us whether like Resistance was originally going to be like a fully fledged title. There's potential in this game, but there almost seems, whether it's through budget or a lack of ambition, a reluctance to really make it exceed in the way it can do. And that's the way that's how I'm going to bow out on my review. It's like there's a good idea, let it be what it can be, but as long as it's held back, Resistance will just unfortunately be that multiplayer mode on the Resident Evil 3 Remake disc.
I agreed. There's nothing much more to add. That was a fantastic review, I think, that and fair as well, that Stars gave. The only thing I'd kind of add to that, he asked a good question as to whether it's sort of ambition or, it started from a very good sort of concept, the game. And I agree with him. There's more than enough evidence to suggest that Al Yang had that ambition and had that desire, not wanting to sort of be overly judgmental when we won't know what goes on behind the scenes. I would suggest perhaps it's more to do with finance and the support or lack of it that Al Yang got, because listening to Stars, it would just sounded so familiar listening to Stars talk about Al Yang's experience and thinking back to Andrew Santos and how he was just like us, a huge fan of the games, and really wanted to strive to make a game that existed within Raccoon City, and just repeatedly was just let down in terms of the support that he got. And so, the game just completely broke down, whereas the initial concept was fantastic. Through lack of financial support, the finished product was just very weak.
Thanks, George. Oracle?
Stars made a lot of good points and stuff. And I thought, when I first played the beta and stuff, I thought, oh, this is going to be a good game. It's nicely paced. You're not rushing or everything. But nowadays, everybody wants to just rush through it to get those points and get those skins. And it doesn't feel like it used to be, where you could just walk around and explore, fight a few zombies, and that's it. Nowadays, everybody wants to rush. This doesn't give you a chance to look around and explore. And then you got to deal with Masterminds spamming the BOWs in one room. They have some things to fix and stuff, but all in all, I think it's a good game as long as it's paced out properly.
To be honest, I think at the end of the day, for me, Resistance is a concept idea that probably should have been wrapped more into the main game, should have been clarified as more of a what-if, non-canon event. And I think there's some great ideas in there, but it's just not well executed. And I think the player base and the fact that I've seen so many people say, I didn't even bother installing it, probably belies how many people were actually playing it. And then you add the elements of how the sales for Remake of 3 has been. I think, unfortunately, it's going to be something that probably doesn't have long legs And if you try and log in probably, I don't know, 6 months to a year from now, you're probably going to struggle on certain platforms to even get games properly running, which is unfortunate. I think with some more finesse and some thought into how the rounds would work and some variety and just some more maps and stuff, they really early on, or at least outlaying exactly what they're going to be doing rather than kind of keeping it a mystery for the foreseeable months, probably would have sparked some more interest as well. So unfortunately for me, it's a pretty big missed opportunity. I think there's some great concepts, but just kind of falters on the execution.
Well, thank you so much. That does conclude our discussion on Resident Evil Resistance. We'll obviously keep you posted with any new news and information that comes to it. We now have time for this podcast edition of Neptune's Biohazard Quiz.
What is the worst that could happen? Oui?
For the past 8 years and 5 seasons, we have brought you groundbreaking lore, in-depth analysis, game reviews, and high-quality content. We've also brought you untold controversies, and countless tales of underhand tactics, all in aid of the quiz.
I'd just like to announce, everybody, that this is 0 points for me this week. Thank you. Goodbye.
So my nomination person said 7, but I didn't agree with 7. I said it was 7T, and then you said it was 7T.
I didn't want people to think I'm cheating by just saying the same number that someone else has said, so I just the next number that sounds similar to 17. I swear I did not cheat, yo!
Jesus Christ. What fucking question is that?
Quite frankly, if we only got 1 point and that's the winning score, then we're not doing our jobs right, and we're all going to have to hand in our biohazard cards.
Welcome to Neptune's Biohazard Quiz. Batman. Stars TyranT. George Trevor. Rombie the Wrecker. Mr. Spencer. Neptune's Biohazard Quiz.
Hello and welcome to Neptune's Biohazard Quiz. We want to first give a big shout out to Charlie Soundhouse for providing us with these questions as part of his benefits for signing up to Patreon. We have used them to test our quizzes. So without further ado, let's go. Question number 1 is a timeline question. So quite a tricky one to start. On what date was Jill and Wesker wrongly declared dead?
We're going to have to cut with the month and everything for that.
Yeah, we'll probably do closest. Question number 2, I really like this question. How big is the starting attaché case in Resident Evil 4 in terms of squares?
That is brutal.
I love it.
Come on. Fucking hell, that is brutal. Fiend.
I know it. I know it's a round amount because it's obviously by something. You know.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for. Something by something.
I think I have this.
Okay. Question number 3. What does Morpheus say in the voice recording you have of him when you use to unlock the voice-activated lock?
Yes!
Question number 4. This is a complicated question, but I think everyone should get the answer. The ancient Greek goddess Ramenousia, who enacts retribution to those who show arrogance, lends their other name to which BOW? So Ramenousia has another name, and it is a BOW in the series. There was clues also in the question. Question number 5 is possibly my favourite ever question. I love this question. Right, not including gold editions, DualShock editions, bonus editions, whatnot. How many of the mainline console games, including remakes, have a number in their title?
Ooh.
English
When-
titles only, no duplicates.
We're not including gold editions.
Not including, yes.
Including gold editions, re-releases, etc.
But
There's a couple of tricky ones in here that I don't know if they
Yeah,
count,
can I
even
just-
though
I mean, like,
some versions have numbers in them.
wait, so I'm a bit confused about the question. So, for example, with Resident Evil 2, that's one.
Yep.
Would Biohazard 2 value?
No.
Japan?
So version. There's no Biohazard. English titles only, please.
Yeah,
English
English
only titles.
English only. Okay, that helps.
Yes, that
And
helps.
are you classing the remakes separate to the originals?
Yes, separate remakes.
Right, okay, cool. Thank you.
No duplicates.
Oh, that's where it becomes difficult.
Just the mainline titles, right?
Mainline titles that have numbers in them.
Okay.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to ask you for a number each time when we get to there. So they're the 5 questions. Join us after this when we'll run through those answers.
Welcome to the Raccoon City Police Department. How can I help you?
Hi, Susanna Taylor. I have a 2 o'clock appointment with Chief Brian Irons.
Okay, yes, I can see this in the diary. You see that room up there? That's the Chief Secretary's waiting room. Head up there and she'll sign you in.
Fantastic. Many thanks. Yes, how do I get up there?
Oh, yeah, directions. Go through that first door in the main hall into a waiting room. Ignore anyone waiting there and just walk through the other door unannounced. Continue along that door, watch out for drips from the ceiling. Go past a set of double doors until you get to the end of the corridor. Go through that door and take a left and proceed to walk up the stairs 1 level. You getting this?
Yes, up the stairs. First floor.
Carry on down this corridor past the oddly colored statues and the priceless ruby it holds without security. Go through the next door and down that corridor. You will then need to enter the STARS office.
The STARS office? Surely I'm not authorized to enter that part of the building.
It's okay. No one's there. They're all dead. Don't inspect the main desk though. You will find in the STARS office room a unicorn medal. Pick that up and then bring it back to the main hall.
What?
With the unicorn medal, place it in the relief over there. The statue will move slightly and the spade key will be revealed in the bucket of water. Take the...
Wait, why do I need to do this? Can't I just go and get the key now? I could probably reach it if it stood on the edge. If not, I'm sure you have a copy of the unicorn medal behind the desk that I can use.
Clearly, you are not a resident of Raccoon City. This is not how it works. With the spade key, walk back the entire route you just took and you can then unlock the door at the end of the corridor.
Why is it locked?
Well, we can't just have any Tom, Dick, or Harry snooping around. This is a police precinct, madam.
You have literally just told me to go into the elite police branch's office and find a hidden medal. This makes no...
In this new corridor, take the only door available and you're then in our library.
Of course I am.
Stay on the same level and exit the library and you will be on the balcony above. Walk around and enter into the waiting room. Simple.
Incredible. Thank you. And when I finish my meeting, do I have to conquer this entire building again?
No, don't be silly. Head back over the balcony and you can use our 15-foot emergency evacuation ladder. Perfectly safe.
I have to say this is absolutely ridiculous. I will be speaking with the chief about this, mark my words. Now, before I go, can you point me in the direction of the nearest bathroom? For the love of...
So I hope everyone enjoyed that interlude. So big thanks to our Discord member Mako there for recording that for us. More of that to come in the future. So question number 1, let's see how well everyone has done, was a timeline question. On what date was Jill and Wesker wrongly declared dead? We'll start with Stars TyranT for this one.
I just went for a guess. September 16th, 2006.
September 16th, 2006. Okay, Rombie.
Only knew the year, October, not October, 2006, but I was going to say October 7th, 2006.
October 7th. George Trevor?
Again, I only knew 2006. I knew it was going to be the end, so I just went with December.
Any date?
Christmas Day, the
Christmas
25th,
Day.
I don't know.
OracleDragon?
Oh, I'm probably way off. I thought that's April 5th, 2003.
Oh, how annoying. It's the 23rd of November 2006, so everyone was right. We've had September, October, December, so we all completely bypassed the month there, so no points, I'm afraid. Question number 2. How big is the starting attaché in Resident Evil 4 in terms of squares? George Trevor, you're looking at a number by number, so...
Yeah, it's just sort of like...
Or total number of squares.
10.
I haven't got the total number of squares.
We should be able to work.
I should be able to work it out.
Yeah. Maths.
Yeah. So, so when you how many blocks when you initially get the item?
Yeah.
I would say roughly one, because each item has more than one little block, doesn't it? Like the spray's 3 blocks, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
So I'll quickly say, because it could be all day. 40.
40. Okay. Oracle Dragon.
288.
Bloody hell.
288. Okay.
One of us is going to be way off there.
Yeah.
Rombie, you're quite confident.
I think it's 60. 10 by 6, I think, is what the starting case is. I'm pretty sure. 60 slots.
Stars TyranT?
I actually went for 60 as well, 10 by 6.
Is the correct answer, and it is 10 by 6 with 60. Yes, very good. Points to Stars and Rob. Very good.
I must have been thinking about the bigger cases by accident.
Possible. I don't know what the bigger ones are. I just remember. I just had to. It's because Nick said visualize it or something like that. And I was like, oh, I remember it being 6 down, and I was like, well, I'm going to guess it's 10 across.
Wow.
So that was a guess.
I always remembered you got 3 weapons, and each weapon took up 2 slots. So if you had like your pistol, your shotgun, and your rifle, that would take up of the starting attaché case, because it's 10 across, 6 down, isn't it? Is how I remembered it. Yeah, and each weapon would take up, and horizontal was just a pure guess.
What does Morpheus say in the voice recording you have of him that you used to unlock the voice-activated lock? Rombie, we'll start with you for this one.
I have no idea. I don't even. I haven't played the game since 2005, probably, so I have no recollections whatsoever. Not even the item. Well, what was that, Sean?
Okay, George.
Sorry, I'm still I love the last question. I'm still counting it up.
Oh, jeez.
Because I've no idea. I'm so gutted. I'm not going to get this right. I've got no idea. I can't believe although my PlayStation 2 broke down a while ago. It has been a while since I've actually played Dead Aim. I don't know.
Oracle Dragon?
For thou hast obeyed my voice.
Okay, Stars TyranT?
It's a variation. I thought it was because thou hast obeyed my voice, but it's the same thing.
Is correct. Well done, Stars and Oracle. I'll give you both the points for that. Spot on.
Yay.
Which were you given, Nick?
Because thou hast obeyed my voice.
Because thou hast obeyed my voice.
But spot on. Well done. Well done. Question number 4. The ancient Greek goddess Ramanusia, who enacted retribution and vengeance to those who showed arrogance, lends their other name to which BOW? It's very guessable. GT.
No, I really haven't got a clue. Can you say the name of the thing again?
Ramanusia. So Ramanusia is a Greek goddess. She has another name.
It probably was in a file, I imagine.
No, it's not. This is more.
I don't recognise the name Ramanusia at all. I don't think it's in any game.
No, it's more of a general knowledge question, but it is guessable. It's very guessable because there is clues in the fact that I've said retribution and vengeance.
Yeah, I've got an idea.
Come on, look at the answer, George.
The Verdugo in
the Verdugo.
Okay.
Okay, Rombie.
I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. No clue.
Stars TyranT?
Initially I went Thanatos, but then you kept alluding to the fact that the clue's there, and the fact that it's a goddess of vengeance and whatnot. I'm actually going to go Nemesis, and the vengeance is against the Stars team for the original game, so Nemesis is my answer.
Okay, Oracle Dragon?
Nemesis.
Is correct. It is the Nemesis, yes. Nemesis is the goddess of vengeance, and another name for...
Oh, of course, it has to be a name for a goddess. That one's called Verdugo. I didn't... Yeah. Good answer.
Okay, so question number 5 was how many of the mainline console games, including remakes, have a number in their title? English titles only, no duplicates, e.g. different editions. So we're looking for a number.
So when you say mainline, are you including, for example, were you including Survivor titles or Revelations titles?
Yes, yeah. It's main console. Yeah, console.
Okay. Great. Thank you for having that clarified, GT, because that was my question as well.
Okay. Right.
And when you say
mainline console games,
so
they need a number.
If they were referred to something else in Japan, then that doesn't count.
No. No.
Okay.
So ignore Japanese Biohazard. Right, Rob, start with you. What's your number?
I think it's 12.
You think it's 12? Stars TyranT, what's your bid?
I had it up to 10, and then I've had an 11th hour revision, and it is 12.
Because of what I said.
Yeah, it's basically because like suddenly I went, oh my god, I've forgotten these two titles as well. I think it's 12, and I think Rob's absolutely spot on.
Yeah. I wish you'd asked me first because everyone's going to accuse me of cheating now.
I literally
Let's get this out the way. My answer is 12 as well.
Your answer is
the reason why I had a delay is because I literally ran to my shelf and was like, shit.
Are you allowed to reference your shelf? That's almost the same as Google.
Oh yeah.
Shelfgate. OracleDragon, what's your submission?
11.
You've gone for 11, have you? Okay, right. I won't tell you.
Want to get me to count? I can always hear the people in your Discord saying that I cheated. So do you want to go with me first so I can count them up?
Well, we can all do it together. Most of you bid 12. But go on then, George.
Yeah.
Go on, take us through it, and I'll tell you if you're right.
Because you've got Resident Evil 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I'm counting it up on my fingers now. You've then got 0, which I almost missed out.
Very good. Yeah.
You've then got the 2 remake. This is where I got confused. What counts as a remake or not? But then you've got the 2 and 3 remakes.
Yes.
We're on 9, where I almost came to an end, and then I remembered Gun Survivor 2, which takes it 10, I think.
10,
yeah. And then wait, there's 2 more. I counted up 2 more because obviously the Biohazard Gun Survivor 4 doesn't count.
Correct.
Oh yes, of course. Yes. So Revelations 2.
Yes.
I think that was it. I have counted 12, haven't I?
Rob's laugh.
That's 11.
You've got 11.
One sec. No, then I'll go with 11. If I can't name it, I'll go with 11. One sec. Wait.
Yeah.
The extra ones that came up was and obviously Gun Survivor 4 we're not counting. Revelations 2.
I fucked up. I meant to say 13.
Right.
Maybe I'm on 11 then. Maybe
I fucking meant to say 13, bastard.
Okay, Rob, what's
I'm definitely not going up. The most I got to was 12. Maybe it was 11.
What's the 12th one? Outbreak File.
Oh yeah, no, that yes, I knew I'd counted that Outbreak 2 because
Outbreak File 2, yeah.
Because it actually doesn't it have like 2 lines on the
it says File.
It says
File 2.
But no, I got Outbreak. Yeah.
So
because File 1, people often refer to Outbreak File 1 as 1, but it's not. It's
not correct.
I'm on 12. I mean, if 13 is the right answer, I've not got that. I only have 12.
Well, we've got the 12 from Rob and from G to E there, but the correct answer is 13.
What's the 13th?
It's 3DS, isn't it? 3DS.
Oh no! No, wait a minute. That's the name of the console.
No,
it's Mercs 3D.
Mercs 3D.
So no points.
Yeah, I just realized as soon as you said that, I was like, yeah, I know which one I've missed.
Right, okay, this is no word of a lie. I had the whole games written out on a piece of paper, and as George went through them, I ticked them off. And then there was a disparity when I saw there was 3 left, and he went, I've got 11 or whatever, and I was like, oh, fucking hell, I've got it wrong. Then when I said 12, fucking hell, there's 13. That was fiendish. That was fiendish.
Fiendish. It was a good question. So the correct answer was.
Would Resident Evil 0 even count because it's not an actual 0? It's just the word 0.
It's actually the word 0. You're right. Yeah.
Well, in the artwork, it's still 0. So.
Oh.
Wait, sorry. Can I just ask?
Let me run to my shelf, guys.
What is the 3DS game? Sorry, not Deadly Silence.
Mercenaries 3D.
Oh, Mercenaries 3D. Oh, fucking hell. That is so out of order.
There we go.
I don't even know if that counts.
It does. It was 13. So let's have a look at the final scores. So
fiendish. It was great.
It was a wonderful question. So sadly...
Did anyone actually score for the question 5 then?
No.
Sorry? So no points. No one
got it.
Even though I revised it to 13 at the 11th hour.
No,
I think if Sean honestly got that himself, he deserves it. If you came up with
I didn't.
Mercenaries 3DS.
I got it by running to a shelf and checking. Oh. It was not general knowledge.
There we go. So let's have a look at the final scores. Sadly, to score this edition is George, who's 0. Rob just with a solitary point. OracleDragon, very good with 2 points, but this podcast winner, it's Stars TyranT with 3. Oh, well done. So fabulous. that concludes the podcast. So thank you, Charlie, for those brilliant questions.
Who yawned?
It wasn't me, I'm telling you. It wasn't.
That was me, but I've had a great time. I'm not bored.
Next you wrap up the quiz, and they're all of a sudden.
It's 20-1. And I was up to
That's
5.
killed Rob off fast.
Join us next time where we'll have some more questions. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for this podcast. We've had fun. We had lots of news. We've dissected Resident Evil Resistance, and we've had a good little fun quiz as well at the end. Coming up next, not sure at the moment. Got some things lined up, which we'll hopefully be able to share with you a bit later on. Got something in the pipeline, but. On that note, I'd like to thank OracleDragon for joining us today as well, but I will say thank you everyone for listening. It's goodbye from me, Neptune.
Goodbye from me, Stars TyranT.
Goodbye from me, Rombie.
Goodbye from me, George Trevor.
Farewell and adieu from the OracleDragon.
Time to end this, do you not think?